Nếu là bây giờ tôi sẽ không im lặng. Tôi về nhà ở với bố mẹ. Tôi đã hiểu biết hơn về pháp luật, bảo vệ những người như tôi nói riêng và phụ nữ nói chung không bị bạo lực.
Hàng trăm bức ảnh, hàng trăm số phận, tất cả cùng gặp nhau ở một điểm. Họ, những người phụ nữ, phải đối diện với bạo lực. Nhưng không phải ai cũng tiếp tục chịu đựng. Có những người đã hành động để giải thoát bản thân, giành lại cuộc sống tự chủ cho mình.
Tôi còn nhớ lần đầu tiên tôi bị anh nắm tóc đập đầu vào giường trong phòng ngủ của hai đứa. Lúc đó tôi choáng váng và xá sẩm hết mặt mày. Nghĩ lại lúc đó thì thấy mình dài quá. Nếu là bây giờ tôi sẽ không im lặng. Tôi về nhà ở với bố mẹ. Tôi đã hiểu biết hơn về pháp luật, bảo vệ những người như tôi nói riêng và phụ nữ nói chung không bị bạo lực.
Hàng trăm bức ảnh, hàng trăm số phận, tất cả cùng gặp nhau ở một điểm. Họ, những người phụ nữ, phải đối diện với bạo lực. Nhưng không phải ai cũng tiếp tục chịu đựng. Có những người đã hành động để giải thoát bản thân, giành lại cuộc sống tự chủ cho mình.
Tới thời điểm này, tôi khẳng định rằng là Việt Nam là một quốc gia đầu tiên trên thế giới đã tiến hành cuộc điều tra lần 2 này. Qua 10 năm thì cái sự cởi mở, cái sự tiến bộ của phụ nữ và cái nhận thức đối với phụ nữ về cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ này nó có cái sự thay đổi rất lớn, rất lớn. Họ sẵn sàng chia sẻ và họ sẵn sàng đấu tranh, phản bác, phê phán và thậm chí là họ sẵn sàng là tố giác đối với cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ.
First and foremost, UNFPA has a corporate vision to address gender-based violence in different countries in the world. We call it transformative agenda to eliminate violence against women and girls, and as well as other harmful practices. We also aim at achieving zero maternal deaths and zero unmet need for family planning. So we have that corporate mandate to do that. So in Vietnam in 2009 and 2010, we have provided support to conduct the first ever survey on gender-based violence for Vietnam. Nearly 10 years later, now it's time to see what change has taken place and what didn't change, and what are the gaps that we still need to address. And this is a fundamental part of it, because such evidence and data are essential for the country's policy making, budget allocation, and program development.
Australia is deeply committed to ending gender-based violence. We immediately agreed to support the government of Vietnam in its second national survey on violence against women and girls. Australia has supported 12 such national prevalence surveys across the Asia-Pacific region to date. We do this because it enables us all to acknowledge just how many lives are affected by violence, coercive control and harassment.
Chấm dứt bạo lực cần phải là ưu tiên hàng đầu của mỗi quốc gia trên toàn thế giới nhằm đạt được mục tiêu phát triển bền vững số 5 về bình đẳng giới. Ở Việt Nam, số liệu và các bằng chứng về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ là cơ sở quan trọng cho các quyết định hành động. Cuộc điều tra quốc gia lần thứ 2 về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ được tiến hành năm 2018-2019 nhằm đo lường về mức độ phổ biến của bạo lực đối với phụ nữ ở Việt Nam và các yếu tố có liên quan để xây dựng chính sách quốc gia, các can thiệp về phòng chống bạo lực trên cơ sở giới, góp phần thúc đẩy tiến bộ phụ nữ và bình đẳng giới ở Việt Nam. Điều tra quốc gia về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ ở Việt Nam năm 2019 do Bộ Lao động Thương binh và Xã hội phối hợp với Tổng cục Thống kê, Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư với sự hỗ trợ kỹ thuật và tài chính của Quỹ Dân số Liên Hợp Quốc UNFPA và Bộ Ngoại giao và Thương mại Australia tại Việt Nam. Gần 6.000 phụ nữ trong độ tuổi 15 đến 64 được phỏng vấn đã cho thấy ở Việt Nam, đa số bạo lực mà người phụ nữ phải chịu đều do chồng hoặc bạn tình gây ra. Bất bình đẳng giới vừa là nguyên nhân cơ bản, vừa là hậu quả của hầu hết bạo lực đối với phụ nữ.
Thế thì bên cạnh việc kế thừa những cái nội dung của các điều tra lần trước, thì lần này trong cuộc điều tra lần này thì chúng tôi cũng mở rộng ra thêm một số thông tin khác để đáp ứng cái nhu cầu nghiên cứu hiện nay. Ví dụ như là liên quan đến cái là vấn đề liên quan thiệt hại do bạo lực gây ra.
Trong nghiên cứu lần này vì nó là một cái nghiên cứu quốc gia và vai trò của các tổ chức xã hội thì chúng tôi đóng góp cái ý kiến cho cái việc là để giúp nhà nước và các cái cơ quan nghiên cứu quốc gia làm sao có cái bộ câu hỏi nó phản ánh đúng được những cái vấn đề mà đang diễn ra trong xã hội.
Nó là vấn đề về an toàn và đạo đức nghiên cứu. Làm sao đảm bảo được cái không gian riêng tư, làm sao đảm bảo được cái việc phỏng vấn đã an toàn nhất. Nạn nhân hoặc là người trả lời khi họ chia sẻ thì họ quay về được an toàn, cũng như là đội điều tra khi mà phỏng vấn.
National Studies on Violence Against Women in Vietnam 2019. In order to perform the state management work effectively, it's crucial to have an adequate, accurate, and comprehensive data system to assess the outcomes or results of exercising policies, programs, and try to strengthen accountability of state management agencies, as well to serve as a basis for inputs into the proposal for formulation and revision of policies and laws. In recent years, central and local authorities have made numerous efforts to collect data in all sectors and spheres. However, to some extent, the needs for data have not been met yet. In the spheres of gender equality, the lack of sex disaggregated data has also limited the analysis of gender equality performance results in all fields, as well as advisory work on policy lawmaking. The attitudes of the people and the services are challenging, so this is quite challenging for the response to gender-based violence. So against this backdrop, in 2010, UN agencies in Vietnam collaborated with the General Studies Office, GSO, MPI invested to conduct a national study on domestic violence against women in Vietnam. This was the first national study on domestic violence against women conducted in Vietnam. The results of the study provided a relatively comprehensive picture of violence against women in the family setting in Vietnam, giving state management agencies, organizations, and research institutes to have the basis and grounds for proposing improvements of laws, policies, community intervention program, and communication activities to raise people's awareness about the negative and adverse consequences of violence on each individual, families, and the society. In 2018, within the framework of the cooperation program between the MOLISA and UNFPA in Vietnam, the second national study on violence against women in Vietnam was conducted. MOLISA was Moliza collaborated with GSO MPI to carry out this study with the technical and financial co-support from the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade DFAT, Australian Embassy in Vietnam, and UNFPA to collect information and data on violence against women in Vietnam to provide evidence for the improvements of laws and policies, programs, and activities in an attempt to minimize violence, helping to boost sustainable social economic development. The study was conducted in a systematic manner and very methodical, following WHO global standards or guidelines in conducting the studies on violence against women in order to ensure the high quality and reliability of statistical data. Immediately after obtaining the data set, national and international consultants promptly began to analyze and formulate the report. So today we organize the launch of the results of the National Studies on Violence Against Women in Vietnam 2019, which is being held and fully participated by representatives from various stakeholders, ministry sectors, localities, UN agencies, embassies, development partners, research institutes, experts and media and press people and journalists, for the event to be widely communicated. In addition to hosting the launch with the participation of more than 100 delegates in this conference room, the organizers also live streamed the event on two Facebook and YouTube channels of UNFPA in both Vietnamese and English languages for domestics and international delegates to watch. Now please welcome all the distinguished guests. From Moliza, I would like to cordially introduce Her Excellency Madame Nguyễn Thị Hà, Vice Minister of Labor, Invalid and Social Affairs, Standing Vice Chair of NC4. From the Australian Embassy to Vietnam, I would like to honorably introduce Madame Rubin Moody, Australia's Ambassador to Vietnam. From UNFPA, I would like to introduce Madame Naomi Kitahara, UNFPA representative in Vietnam. From the GSO, Ministry of Planning and Investment, I would like to introduce Mr. Phạm Quang Vinh, Deputy Director General, GSO. We also welcome Mr. Chu Đức Nhuận, Secretary of the Office of the Government. I would like to introduce Madame Mary, UN 8. Madame Nguyễn Nguyệt Minh from UNODC. From the consultant team, I would like to warmly introduce Dr. Christine Diermerber, Senior Research Fellow, University of Melbourne. Dr. Henrika Jensen, UNFPA Asia and the Pacific Regional Office, Technical Lead, NOWOW Data. Ms. Jessica Gardner, Data Analysis and Gender Statistics Consultant, NOVA Data. Dr. Nata Duvery, Director, Center for Global Women's Studies, National University of Ireland. Due to the movement restriction due to COVID pandemic in the world, so our consultants cannot attend this event directly, but they will follow and share the contents related to the study via internet connection, and now they are directly engaged in our event. Regarding the member of the consultant team, I would like to introduce Madame Hoàng Tú Anh, co-founder of CSIP. The consultant team developing the report, I would like to introduce Dr. Sima Viet from London and Madame Phan Thị Minh Hiền, researchers from MPI. The two guests cannot attend our event today. I would like to introduce the participation of distinguished guests representing Doliza Statistical Office, United Nations agencies, embassies, development partners, research institutes, experts, reporters, journalists from media and press agencies, and the wide participants of viewers on the events to live stream channels that are Facebook and YouTube of UNFPA, especially the participation of the researchers, the site surveyor who contribute to the success of our national study. Now I would like to introduce and invite Madam Nguyễn Thị Hà, Vice Minister of LISA, Standing Vice Chair of NC4, to deliver the opening remarks. Madam Rubin Moody, Ambassador to Vietnam, Australia, Madam Naomi Kitahara, representative of UNFPA in Vietnam, Mr. Phạm Quang Vinh, Deputy Director General of SGSO, MPI, representative of Office of the Government, Ministry, Sectors, Central Agencies, International Organizations, distinguished guests, today in the capital of Hanoi, Molisa, in collaboration with GSO, MPI, UNFPA in Vietnam, and Australian Embassy in Vietnam, organized the launch of the results of the National Study on Violence Against Women in Vietnam 2019 to widely disseminate to you the results of this national study. On this occasion, may I, on behalf of all the co-organizing agencies, to send to all the international guests and domestics participants wishes of good health and happiness. I would like to send the best thanks to all the media people coming to report to our event today. Developing a society of equality free from violence against women and girls is one of the goals of all nations to achieve the SDGs. In Vietnam, after 10 years of implementing the gender equality law, the role and status of women in family and in the society have been improved gradually. The ratio of female National Assembly deputies has reached 26.8%, higher than the world average level and higher than the Asian country of 20%. Female workers account for 48%, and we have a high percentage of the female-headed household. They are eligible to the loans from the Bank for Social Policies for job creation. The ratio of women of ethnic minority who are literate is 92.8%. The gender gap in the general schools is not many, and then the maternal mortality related to pregnancy has reduced to a very low level. The efforts in exercising gender equality has been recognized by the global community, and Vietnam has been assessed as one of the 10 countries that well performed the SDGs of the Asia and the Pacific in 2017, and is one of the 10 countries that is leading in implementing the goal number 5 on gender equality globally. In addition to the achievements, the progress of exercising gender equality is facing challenges and a lot of arising issues that are impacting negatively on women and children, including life, employment, social security, especially violence, sexual abuse, which is causing a lot of concerns in the society, and the disparity in accessing the healthcare services for mothers, childbearing, child raising, especially ethnic minority women, women in remote area, and the consequences of the imbalanced sex ratio at birth as well. Facing that situation, the government has guided different levels and sectors to implement the solutions to prevent and to minimize the situations of violence against women and children, and to improve the work of gender equality. And this is considered a very significant foundation, showing the interest and strong commitment of Vietnam in implementing SDGs and to ensure social security, leaving no one behind. Ladies and gentlemen, under the framework of the cooperation program between MOLISA and UNFPA in Vietnam in 2017-2021, MOLISA, in collaboration with GSO MPI, to conduct the National Study on Violence Against Women in 2018 and 2019, with a view to collecting the data on situations of violence against women, and to collect more evidence for formulating and improving the legal documents and policies related to gender equality and violence against women, to improve and to raise the quality of all the services in response to gender-based violence in Vietnam. We are very pleased and gratitude that our national study received support and collaboration from DFAT, the Australian Embassy in Vietnam, and UNFPA in Vietnam. They give us both financial and technical support, and to date, Vietnam is the first country to conduct the second national study on violence against women, as compared with the national study in 2010. This time, the study has been expanded in scope, with the age of the participant from 15 to 64 in 63 provinces and cities, including women with disabilities, ethnic minority women. Previously, it was really difficult to conduct a study on them. And then regarding the component, the quant and the qualitative components was included, and we have the questions on economic costs of violence against women, and this is very new. So it has been nearly 10 years since the first study. The results of the national study this time have shown a lot of positive changes. However, there are still limitations. We see the very positive changes, and in general, the ratio of women subject to different forms of violence has slightly reduced, and we see the positive changes in young people group, young female group. They are stronger in fighting against violence, and the highly educated people or women have a lower rate of violence victims. So this has made women to be more independent and stronger in their life. However, many women are subject to violence, and the situation of violence against women is still concealing due to the very popular gender stereotypes in the society, the silence, the discrimination of the community, and the blaming is a barrier which hinder the victim, the survivors, to report or to seek for support. Children are also the victims, and they are vulnerable when they live in the family with perpetration of violence. There should be remedies from the state management agencies, as well as active participations from social, political organizations, and each individual in the society. We highly appreciate strong collaboration from GSO, MPI, valuable support from UNFPA in Vietnam, DFAT, Australian Embassy in Vietnam, in conducting this study, helping Vietnam to have updated data to serve the improvement of law and policies, relevant programs. And this study will also meet better life for the women in Vietnam. MOLISA, as a role of a state management on gender equality, we will focus our study and to propose for improvement of laws and policies in response to violence against women in Vietnam, especially in developing the national strategy on gender equality, period 2021-2030. and the Scheme on Prevention and Response to Gender-Based Violence 2021-2025. The data and information from the study report will enable us to have proposals and more effective solutions. We strongly believe that the data and statistics from the study report will be the very useful grounds for organizations and individuals who are interested in developing the programs, the policies on prevention of gender-based violence in Vietnam. Gender-based violence, especially violence against women, is considered a serious problem and difficult to be eliminated, but it doesn't mean it will not be ended. Me, you, everybody should act promptly, and we will not tolerate any forms of violence. With that meaning, I would like to declare open our launch of the National Study on Violence Against Women in Vietnam 2019. Once again, on behalf of leadership of Molisa, I would like to thank strong commitment and support from UNFPA, DFAT, in implementing the national study this time and during the whole process. You have given us valuable support in developing our national strategy on gender equality of the new phase of the new period, and then the scheme on response to gender-based violence 2021-2025. So we are happy to receive the representative from the Office of the Government who will give advice to the leadership of the government in appraising and reviewing the scheme and strategy for 2021, 2025, and 2021, 2030 in both strategy and the scheme. So you will receive the multidimensional information from both domestic and international organizations. UN organizations and NGOs is very meaningful, and this will support us a lot in developing our policies in the coming time. We are grateful to national and international consultants, surveyors who collaborated with us in this course. Once again, thank you so much and wish you good health. Wish we have a fruitful conference today. I'm very sorry. So my voice is hoarse, not very beautiful because I have a cold for several days. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Nguyễn Thị Hà, Vice Minister of Molisa. Through this presentation and opening remarks, we can see clearly the reliability and the expansion of the data gained in this study of this year. And this data shows us the stories and the in-depth analysis. We will come to the related study report soon in the next part of the workshop. And now I would like to give the floor and to introduce to you the representative of COICA, Madame Madie, Deputy Director of the ICT of COICA Korea in Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, and now we would like to introduce and give the floor to Mr. Phạm Quang Vinh, Deputy Director General of GSO, for the opening remarks. Madam Nguyễn Thị Hà, Vice Minister of Molisa, Madam Robin Moody, Australian Ambassador to Vietnam, Madam Naomi Kitahara, UNFPA Rep in Vietnam, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Violence against women is a global issue, from the poor, the developing, to the rich and developed countries, including Vietnam. Violence against women has had many serious impacts to the human being, restricting the participation of women in the life and community, And violence against women does not only cause the physical and psychological impacts on women, but also seriously impact the life and the growth of women, and seriously violating the development and the human rights. And now Vietnam has been a member of many important UN conventions, for example, the Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Aspect, the Convention on Elimination of All Discrimination Against Women, and the Convention on Elimination of All Discrimination Against the Ethnic minorities, and legislation related to this topic has been improved and developed, including the direct related laws like law on the prevention of domestic violence, law on gender equality, law on marriage, or labor code, which are the indirect ones. However, the report on the status and the legal proposal for the implementation and enforcement of this law annually carried out by the authorities have been limited due to the lack of the sufficient information, among others. As we know, in 2010, under the Joint Cooperation Framework on Gender Equality, GSO has carried out the study on violence against women in Vietnam, and the study has provided the various database to analyze violence against women in Vietnam, and the methodology of the qualitative and quantitative methodology of the study has been already introduced, and the lessons learned from the very first study, national study in 2010, have been disseminated widely in Vietnam and in the world, with a second study carried out in 2019-2018. GSO is very happy to cooperate with the Malaysia Embassy of Australia and Viet to carry out this study, and we hope that with the study findings for the first time, introducing the statistical data of the popularity of the violence against women in Vietnam, domestic violence, the risk and the solution of women for these or to address this violence, and also the picture of the trends, of the changing trends over the past 10 years. And this will support a lot the government authorities, the researchers, and other relevant stakeholders in analyzing the gender equality and in improving the legal legislation on gender equality and violence against women in Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very sensitive topic that can hardly be interpreted and monitored like other topics carried out by GSO, because of the sensitivity in the research teams related to the social norms and the lack of the information. We have put a lot of efforts and caution in the preparation and implementation of this study to ensure the compliance in terms of the code of ethics in the study on violence against women. GSO is very proud to be trusted and to be assigned to collect the quantitative data in the two studies. And on this occasion, we would like to thank Malaysia Australian Embassy, UNFPA, and also other relevant stakeholders in supporting us in the field study of this national study, from the very first step of the development of the concept to the final findings today. And last but not least, on behalf of the GSO, we would like to wish all the delegates, distinguished guests, good health and success, and we wish for a fruitful workshop. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Phạm Quang Vinh, Deputy Director General of GSO. And now I would like to invite Madame Naomi Kitahara, UNFPA representative in Vietnam, to have the opening remarks. Over to you.
Minister of Labour Invalid Social Affairs, Madam Gwen Tiha, Honourable Mr. Phan Quang Vinh, General Statistics Office Deputy Director, Excellency Ms. Robin Moody, Australian Ambassador to Vietnam, distinguished guests, representatives from government ministries, social organizations and research institutes, embassies, international development partners, NGOs, UN colleagues, young people, media, fellows, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here today to disseminate the results of the second national study on violence against women in Vietnam, which was conducted in 2019. Vietnam is the only country in the world so far which has successfully conducted the study on violence against women for the second time using WHO's methodology, and this was made possible with technical and financial support from the Government of Australia through its Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, and UNFPA. The second study allows us all to better understand what has changed and what has not changed, and what needs to be put in place for further change to eliminate violence against women in Vietnam. I would like to express my deep appreciation to MORISA, GSO, and other government organizations, NGO partners including CICIP, DFAT, for their tireless efforts throughout the study over the last 2 years, from localization and finalization of questionnaires to training of interviewers, data compilation and analysis, as well as report writing and the preparation of supplementary documents to make it user-friendly and reader-friendly. Having done different kinds of surveys in the world, I can attest to how immense the work has been and how much everyone's energy has gone into it to bring the whole exercise at the level we have today. Ladies and gentlemen, this report is a landmark. We now have renewed evidence, the true story about the reality in Vietnam of women's experience of violence at home, at work, and in public space, usually from their husbands and partners, but also from non-partners. This is a huge step forward in our efforts to prevent and end violence against women and to strengthen services and support needed for victims of violence. Violence against women is one of the most pervasive human rights violations that exist in the world today, including in Vietnam. Violence against women may occur in a multitude of different contexts, including home, workplace, public and social spaces. Data from the 2019 study shows that nearly 2 in 3 women, 62.9%, experienced one or more forms of physical, sexual, emotional, and economic violence and controlling behaviors by their husbands in their lifetime, and 31.6% currently in the last 12 months. But almost all women, 90.4%, who experienced physical and or sexual violence from husbands didn't seek any help from formal service providers, largely because of the fear of stigma, discrimination, and further harassment. It means that violence against women in Vietnam is very much hidden. And the 2019 survey that we are launching today is to disclose such untold stories so that we can take immediate action to prevent and eliminate violence against women in Vietnam. In Vietnam, at home, which should be a place of love, comfort, and security, does not necessarily seem to be a safe place to be for too many Vietnamese women and for their children. The impact of violence goes well beyond the immediate physical and emotional harm caused. The 2019 study confirms that violence against women causes long-term stress, ill health, and trauma, and it stays for life. And it is particularly concerning that pregnant women are at risk of being beaten, punched, or kicked during pregnancy, leading to miscarriage, stillbirth, and abortion. Children are also victims when living in a household where their mother was beaten, with serious risks for their well-being. The study proves that violence is a learned behavior, and it estimates that 4.4% of women did experience child sexual abuse before the age of 15. Ladies and gentlemen, without addressing the issue of violence against women, there is no way that Vietnam can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. We have only 10 years left to do that. And according to the study report, violence against women is costing Vietnam an estimated 1.8% of GDP in 2018, and this is huge. The 2019 study, however, shows some positive lights as well, which we need to tap into for our policy and program agenda. For instance, except sexual violence, all forms of violence were slightly lower in 2019 than in 2010. And this is more pronounced among young generations. Also, the 2019 report witnessed change in gender norms amongst young people to the progressive direction. This means that we must make right investment on young people to accelerate change in eliminating violence against women. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend my profound appreciation and immediate respect to those who were interviewed in the study for their courage and for their will to make change and to share their stories. As a woman, as a mother, and as a wife, I want to call on other women in Vietnam as leaders, businesswomen, mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters to speak up against violence. And I quote a woman who was interviewed in a study. She said, quote, "I say this to other women. If you feel like you can endure, then endure. Otherwise, find a way to live for yourself. We should not be so afraid of the stigma, and we should not bury ourselves in a prison," unquote. Finally, I would like to commend my team in UNFPA Vietnam, Moriza staff, GSO staff, for their very hard work done for this study. They have worked days and nights, weekends, weekdays, and their commitment and effort have been truly exceptional. Together, we can end violence against women in Vietnam. And thank you very much for your attention and participation today.
Thank you so much, Madam Naomi Kitahara, representative of UNFPA in Vietnam. Now I would like to introduce Madam Robin Moody, Australian ambassador to Vietnam, to deliver remarks.
Kính thưa quý vị, bà Nguyễn Thị Hà, Thứ trưởng Bộ Thương binh Lao
Thứ trưởng Bộ Lao động Thương binh Xã hội. Kính thưa ông Phạm Quang Vinh, Phó Tổng cục trưởng Tổng cục Thống kê.
Ms. Naomi Kitahara, UNFPA representative in Vietnam, and colleagues joining us here today and via live stream across the region and as far as Australia and other countries. Eliminating gender-based violence is an enduring policy commitment of Australia. As Ms Kitahara just said, gender-based violence is a serious violation of human rights and women's rights. It affects women, girls, children, families, and vulnerable groups at all levels of society around the world. So we are very pleased to be here today to join the launch as a donor to Vietnam's National Study on Violence Against Women 2019. It takes courage and resolve as nations ask ourselves hard questions. How safe is home or work life for women? How tolerant are we of acts and attitudes, subtle or overt, that undermine this? I congratulate Vietnam on undertaking this prevalence study and being the first nation to do so for a second time. This is a demonstration of Vietnam's leadership, and it inspires great confidence in the Vietnamese government's capacity to respond to the study. For nearly 2 decades, Australia has invested in data collection on women's health and life experiences across the Asia-Pacific region. To date, we have supported 11 survey processes with partner governments, UNFPA and others, and Vietnam represents the 12th such study. We've made this a priority in the first instance because violence endangers and diminishes the lives of women and girls. And we're also convinced by Australia's own journey on responding to gender-based violence of the power of data to change minds and to inform a just and adequate response. We know that a lot has changed globally in the conversation and the response to violence since Vietnam's first study was published in 2010. For a start, in many countries, including in Australia, it's now easier to talk about gender-based violence publicly. We increasingly acknowledge that the roots of violence lie in gender inequality and that women's economic dependence and their concern for the welfare of their children, combined with the disempowering psychological impact of violence, make it hard for women to leave situations of violence. Thanks to this study, we now also have data on the significant economic costs of violence, the extraordinary cost to GDP from reduced productivity, the significant out-of-pocket health and legal costs which are borne by women, and what it takes to fund comprehensive services for survivors. The data in this second prevalence study in Vietnam is a call to action, and the study's expanded scope, which includes a focus on the economic impact of the prevalence of violence against women and an expanded age range for respondents, makes it an even more powerful tool. The study shows that 2 in every 3 women have known violence in their lifetime. It shows that violence and disrespect is normalised in so many relationships, and that there is a profound isolation for victims, most of whom don't disclose or seek assistance. This study carries the voices of these women. It carries their voices to our conscience and to the public conversation that is needed. In between the lines of this report, there is also light and learning from the women whose lives do not appear in the statistics. It shows that there are women who are safe and respected. There are women whose male partners witnessed family violence in their childhoods but rejected this behaviour and didn't perpetrate it in later life. It shows that younger women are less constrained in disclosing an experience of violence. And it shows that there are women and girls with a disability or from ethnic minority backgrounds who live free from this harm. We need to build on these factors that deliver equality and safety for women. This year, 2020, has seen an escalation of violence against women and children arising from the impact of COVID-19 on people's lives, especially due to the effects of enforced isolation at home and restrictions on movement. Vietnam has been a model for many nations in its preemptive, clear and urgent action in response to COVID-19. including its social protection measures for those most affected, which demonstrate Vietnam's commitment to leave no one behind. We know that there are lessons from this response to be drawn on in looking at the eradication of violence, and we continue to pledge our support to Vietnam to support its response to this important report. Australia's new development strategy, Partnerships for Recovery, Australia's COVID-19 development response, sets out our development priorities for the next 2 years. Alongside a focus on health, security, stability and economic recovery, it has restated Australia's emphasis on promoting gender equality and addressing gender-based violence. Based on this, on the 17th of June, we launched a $2.5 million Australian package of support to women and children survivors of violence under COVID-19 in Vietnam. This program is being jointly implemented by UNFPA, UN Women and UNICEF, and the initiative will provide essential services such as emergency housing and counselling to public awareness campaigns. We pledge to be a consistent partner to Vietnam on this issue. I'd like to conclude by expressing our sincere thanks, firstly to Vice Minister Ha of Malaysia. Australia is very proud to work with you as a partner on a number of gender initiatives, and we're motivated by your leadership in pursuing gender equality in Vietnam. I'd like to express our thanks to the General Statistics Office, which is a regional role model and mentor. Your skill in examining social issues helps us to better understand Vietnam. And I'd like to express our thanks to UNFPA, whose global technical leadership and ethics allow us to be able to safely measure this dimension of women's lives. And finally, I'd like to express our thanks to the research teams both here and far away at the University of Melbourne and the Centre for Creative Initiatives in Health and Population. Your expertise and careful training of more than 100 field researchers has built women's trust in this process. No society is immune from gender-based violence. No country can afford to be passive. Not Australia, not Vietnam. We all have a role to speak up. We all have a role to acknowledge that this is an issue. We all have a role to support the process in our fields of endeavour. Australia is committed to staying the course with the Government of Vietnam, to support the dissemination of this powerful data and to respond to the report's recommendations. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Robin Moody, Australian Ambassador to Vietnam. Ladies and gentlemen, the national study on violence against women in 2019 consists of the three components: a quantitative component, qualitative component, and component on economic damage caused by VAW. Quantitative component conducted by GSO includes the review and testing of questionnaires, training for surveyors, field surveyors, and data processing staff. Qualitative component conducted by the CSIP aims at the better understanding of the core issue and clarify quantitative results, while also focus on issues that cannot be studied by the quantitative method. Component 3, component on economic costs of VAW, conducted by international consultants authorized by UNFPA, and we will now present you the overview of the study delivered by representatives of the participating agencies and the findings. And the next part of the presentation, we would like to invite Madam Trần Thị Bích Loan, Deputy Director, Gender Equality Department, Malaysia, Madam Nguyễn Thị Việt Nga, GSO, and Madam Hoàng Tú Anh, co-founder of CSIP, to the stage to share with us. Thank you. Vice Minister Nguyễn Thị Hà, Madam Robin Moody, Australian Ambassador to Vietnam, Madam Naomi Kitahara, UNFPA representative in Vietnam, ladies and gentlemen, under the assignment of the organizer, the working group of Malaysia, GSO, and CSIP would like to present you an overview of the study on violence against women in Vietnam in 2019. We will present you three parts. First, the overview of the study, the qualitative study, and then quantitative study. Overview of the study. The study in 2019 aims to monitor and evaluate the popularity and frequency of the violence against women and girls. We will monitor the frequency and the popularity of different forms of violence for women caused by former husband and partner, including the frequency, the level of impact for women at the age of 15 up, and also the violence under any form to them before 15 years old, and also the level of impact of violence on the psychological, the health, and also the overall health of women, and the impact of violence caused by the husband on the children, and also other impacts of violence on generations, and the violence against the women by husband and partners. And we will monitor the direct costs arising from violence by husband, partner, and impacts of violence on work, labor, productivity, and the national economy, the factors that put women at higher risk of violence, and the changes between 2010 and 2019 in terms of violence against women and girls in Vietnam.
Regarding the scope of the survey, it is the second study conducted in Vietnam. As compared with the study conducted in 2010, this has been expanded in scope. In 2010 survey, it was the age range. The first survey, the age range was 18 to 60, and the sample size was 5,300. But in the second study, the age range is 15 to 64, and the sample size is 6,000. The questionnaire has been extended to the questions to measure the economic costs of violence, and we have extended to the respondents of the women with disabilities and ethnic minority women.
Và hợp phần định lượng thì hợp phần định tính thì được nghiên cứu cùng với cả hợp phần định lượng.
The qualitative and quantitative components are included. As we have introduced the three parts in my presentation, the quantitative components was conducted by the international consultant team in collaboration with the GSO staff to develop the study reports and based on the statistics collected by GSO from the survey. Participating in this study as introduced by our leaders, the study was co-funded by UNFPA and DFAT in Vietnam, both technically and financially. Molisa is a host agency to conduct this study and to collaborate the study, to coordinate the study. The GSO conducted the quantitative component, the CCIP conducted the qualitative component, and we also have one component on economic costs of violence. This study was conducted from January 2018 with the organization of a kick-off workshop to prepare for this study, to seek for comments from delegates on the tools and the necessary activities to conduct the study. By March 2018, we organized the kick-off workshop for this study, and relevant activities related to collecting data, organizing the training for the remunerator, which was conducted in October in 2018. After that, the study was conducted with two components, quantitative and qualitative. In 2019, we completed both the components. After we have collected all the data, GSO cleaned the data and handed over it to the consultant team in June and May. After that, our consultant team started to develop the report, and we held several consultation workshops to seek comments for the draft report prepared by our consultants. Today in Hanoi, we organized the launch of the National Study on Violence Against Women in Vietnam 2019.
Và chúng tôi xin được giới thiệu một số những
We would like to
hình
introduce
ảnh
some
tôi đã
pictures,
có được
some
từ
images
các hoạt động
we collected
liên quan
from
tới
the
điều tra
activities
này.
related to
Tiếp
this
theo giới
study.
thiệu về hợp phần nghiên cứu
Now I would like
của
to
giáo sư chuyên trách Viện
introduce
Bản Việt Thị Việt Nam
the
đến từ vụ xã hội môi trường Viện Bản Việt
quantitative
Lê Trình Bày.
component, which will be presented by Madam Nguyễn Thị Nga from GSO.
Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu,
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be on behalf of GSO team representing more than 100 surveyors participated in this quantitative component during 2 months, in November and December 2018.
Quá trình thực hiện điều tra thì có thì bắt đầu từ quý 1 năm 2018. Thực ra cái công việc để chuẩn bị
The
cái điều tra này
preparatory process for the survey started in the first quarter of 2018.
năm 2016, 2017.
The preparation was started even in 2016, 2017, and it started in the first quarter of 2018. The survey procedure and questionnaire were finalized in wide consultation with various stakeholders. We tested the questionnaire in the Peaceful House and in other places in Hanoi, and we also translated the questionnaire. We conduct the interview with our neighbors, with the surrounding people to see whether they understand well the questionnaire. I would like to thank Madame Thuy for her active support without any paper identity, but she allowed us to get access to the survivors. The questionnaire was officially tested in Hòa Bình and Da Nang provinces to further finalize the questionnaires, and through CAPI, the computer-assisted personal interviews. The 10-day training for 120 remunerators was conducted. We selected 100 remunerators to conduct our study. And then the field surveys, the field work was conducted. It was during the Christmas time and the Tet holidays, so we tried to finish before the Tet holiday. So we had the online surveillance since January and April. We cleaned the raw material and then handed over to our consultant for calculation and analysis. The quantitative surveys include 5,564 women over the 63 countries, representing all the country, regional, rural, and urban areas. People were selected from 500 sites. We only interview one woman per household, 12 households per survey site, and we had household interview and direct interview in CAPI. We use CAPI as a tool. We mobilized remunerator. They must be female because the interviewees are females. So the interviewers are also females. So informants aged from 18 to 60, 28 to 60, they should be experienced in life. So we mobilized the staff, which was 100 people from statistical offices from different provinces and collaborators. We include a team lead, one editor, and 4 remunerator in a team. For the quality control mechanism, the team lead didn't conduct the survey. He only controlled to ensure the safety during the whole process at the site. The four remunerator will conduct the study. After each site, they will develop a report at the site and send right after the day they conducted the field survey. We also had staff from our department, and we control and monitor the change of samples we selected from the midterm population census, moved to the team lead, transferred to the team lead. And when we had any changes, 6 women were chosen alternatively, and the women must be accepted by the online investigation. Regarding the field trips conducted by GSO and concerned agencies, the name of the study, not like we see today. So on the screen, you see the launch of the national study on violence against women in Vietnam, but the name of the study that appear on any paper of GSO and concerned agencies are the survey on women's health and life experience. We ensure the confidentiality of information. We have hotline and supporting documents during the whole process of the study. Ms. Vân Anh is always online to support us. We interview 1 woman per household, 12 households per surveyed site. The interview location is in the community or at the households, but we encourage the location to be in the community so that no interference should be at home or in households. 1 day per 1 site. So during 1 night, the women will not stay the night, and 12 women per day for the interview. You know, it's very troublesome in rural area or in a small community. People will have rumor on a group of women to be asked or to be interviewed. That's why we ask the women to not to stay the night after the interview. Different forms of violence against women measures in the quantitative surveys won't be introduced more clearly by the consultant team. I would like to skip this. The violence by husband, partner, or violence by others, they are non-partners, were measures. Regarding the content of the quant survey questionnaire, we didn't include the term violence in our questionnaire. We go step by step. First of all, we ask information about households, about the informants and the community, the overall health situation, reproductive health, their children. We ask about her husband, her viewpoints. From section number 7, we ask about her partner or husband. We will ask each act of violence. For example, have you ever slept by the husband? Have you ever threatened or intimidated by your husband, such as scowling, yelling, smashing things, etc.? We always based on the WHO guidelines on how to conduct a survey or study. We do not directly mention the term violence, whether it is serious or not, but by using our questions and our techniques, we can know it is violence or not. Although the victims do not have to disclose directly whether she is subject to violence or not. So the other images we collected at the sites to ensure the privacy. And here there's a picture of the women who returned home after the first day. We'd like to say thank you to 100 remunerators. They did not care about the rain, the sun, living away from the family, so that the study was conducted during 2 months. So they also did not stay overnight at the survey site. Now I give the floor to Ms. Tú Anh for the qualitative component.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the research team of CCIP, I would like to present you on the qualitative component. In this study, as other speakers have already mentioned, there are some differences from this second study compared to the first study. Namely, the first study, the quant and the quality studies have been done simultaneously. But in this study, after the questionnaire, the survey, and also the analysis with the primary results, then will we implement the qualitative study. And you know that when they process the data, they see that there are some questions that cannot be answered. For example, we talk about the causes of violence. There is a large proportion said that it is the domestic conflict. But you know, when we round that part of domestic conflict, we don't know which special or specific items are included. So we need to have the qualitative study to work on this. And some respondents said that they haven't shared about the violence story over the past 10 years or look for any official or former assistance service. So the question is that after these years, with many policies, many efforts and services, why haven't they come to us? And also when we talk about the sex violence, we have the increasing proportion, and we see the higher number of the reports made by the younger people compared to the elder. Then the qualitative study will help us to answer these questions. And the objective of the qualitative are as follows. First, to provide the context. We talk about culture, economic, and social contexts that are changing and impact the violence. And we can have like the cross review between the quant and the qualitative component, because in the qualitative component we have just a short time of contact with the respondent. We will cross-check if the results fully reflect the current status or picture, and the qualitative will further explain it, and also it will discover other issues that cannot be answered or found by the quantitative study. For example, due to the budget limitation, some questions cannot be fully answered. So in order to have an overall picture, we need to work on different size of sample, and the cost will be increased sharply. For example, with the group of the women with disability, if we want to have a quantitative study of women with disability, then we will require more cost. And with this qualitative study, with the smaller sample size, we still can answer this question. And due to the limited time and resources, we cannot cover all the resources of the target groups, but I believe that the qualitative component will supplement the results and finding of the quantitative study. Regarding the site, once we have the quantitative results, then the GSO will provide us with the information of the violence cases over the past 12 months, because you know that with a very short period of the qualitative study, implemented urgently. At that time, it was at the end of the year, so we didn't even thought that we could not make it. But at the end of the day, the Australian Embassy supported us and funded for this activity in November and December, the end of the year. It was very urgent. And when we went to the communes in order to find the female victims of violence, to discuss with them, it is very important. So we want to focus on the areas with the high number of the violence cases over the past 12 months. So we base on that data to select the target size, including 3 sites representing the north, the south, and the central. And in each region, we also select the area of ethnic minority, because you know that with the quantitative study, the ethnic group was not very sufficiently studied. So we selected the ethnic areas with the communes that can represent different contexts of culture. For example, the Hmong, Nung, Hmong, or other Khmer and other ethnic minorities with the different or differentiated culture. So this is a sample size about 200, more than 200 joy, of which 46 joy the in-depth interviews, including the women with disability and ethnic women. And in the study team, we cover 3 areas because of the very limited time. We did it simultaneously. We divided the team into 3 sub-teams, 1 main surveyor, 2 supporting surveyors, and 1 logistics staff. And similarly to the quantitative component, the code of ethics and the safety are highly considered. And we selected women as a surveyor. And when we work with them, with the victims, we said that we know that violence is a very important aspect in order to know about the life, the well-being, and the health of the women there. And then we worked with the local staff to have the follow-up activities carried out by them. And we also brought the leaflets and brochure of other programs like mother and child health care program, and all children with autism program. And for each unit, we also send the consultant that can advise them. Besides, when we listen to the story of the violence, we can also give them some advice or consulting services. So it is about the qualitative component. Thank you.
Thank you very much, representatives from different agencies, to share their part in implementing the study. So personally, I want to share that recently, our VTV conducted a series of spotlight articles on violence against women, but it is of a narrower scope. It is dating violence. I see a very common point. Sometimes the insider, the women, they do not recognize they are the victims. They do not recognize or realize that they need to protect themselves or who to talk to. It's because of the gender stereotypes. They see they need to be tolerant, and they consider it is women to be tolerant. So as we read on newspapers, a lot of women was beaten for 2 hours just because the boyfriend did not allow her to go out. She could not practice the right of going out. and the guy or the boyfriend control all the text messages, etc. And all the girls will not know how to protect themselves and who to seek support to. So a lot of such a study like this is quite significant so that women can understand about different forms of violence and to protect themselves. There's another report from our international consultants. Due to COVID-19, they cannot be attended directly to us, but through international connection, we can connect to them. Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu, các vị khách quý, chúng tôi rất vui mừng được trình bày về các phát hiện của cuộc điều tra quốc gia về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ năm 2019. Như đã được đề cập từ trước,
this project was a large undertaking with many partners and collaborators. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor. We are very pleased to be here to present the findings of the National Study on Violence Against Women in Vietnam 2019. As has been mentioned already, this project was a large undertaking with many partners and collaborators. It is an honor to have been part of this important project with this amazing team and to present some of the key findings of this study. Our presentation today includes 6 sections, and there'll be 4 people presenting. The first section will be presented by Henriette Jensen and will include an overview of the types of violence measured in the study and the findings on violence that women experienced at the hands of husbands and partners. In the second section, I will present some findings about violence by people other than husbands or intimate partners, as well as some of the strategies women use to cope with violence. Henriette will then return to discuss the differences we can see in the 29 results in comparison with the first survey in 2010. The fourth section will be presented by Jessica Gardner. She will describe some findings on the impact violence has on women and their children and the factors that increase the risk of partner violence. Then we will have Nata Devuri speaking about the findings on what the economic costs of partner violence are. Finally, I will outline the conclusions and recommendations developed from the 2019 study, building on the work that has been done in Vietnam to reduce violence against women since the 2010 study. The recommendations were developed in collaboration with Melissa, the study stakeholders, and the research team to ensure that they were meaningful for Vietnam.
Excellencies and distinguished guests, while there are many forms of violence against women, in this study we looked in particular at 2 overarching types, 2 groups of violence. The first group is violence by intimate partners, and intimate partners is a term that covers husbands, cohabiting partners, fiancés, etc. And in Vietnam, this group includes mainly husbands. That's why in this presentation we mainly use the term violence by husbands rather than by partners. And the second group is violence by non-partners, which is a term that we use for persons who are not husbands or partners, but for example, relatives, colleagues, neighbors, strangers, etc. In the study for violence by husbands, we included the following types of violence: physical, sexual, and psychological violence, and economic abuse. And in the survey, violence was measured by asking about specific acts rather than using the word violence. Physical violence included acts like slapping, kicking, strangling, and so on. Sexual violence includes acts like forced sexual intercourse and humiliating sexual acts. Psychological violence covered 2 subtypes: emotional violence, including humiliation and threats, and controlling behaviors, such as preventing a woman from talking to friends and family. And finally, there is economic abuse by husbands, such as not allowing that the wife decides how to use her money, for example. As mentioned earlier, the study also looked at violence by other people, strangers or persons she knows. And this included physical and sexual violence that happened to her since age 15. And women were also asked about their experience of physical and sexual violence in her childhood, before she was 15 years old. In a survey, you do not know in advance who has experienced violence and who not. And to obtain the prevalence of violence, all women in the survey are asked the same questions on behavioral acts. To estimate the prevalence rate of violence, we calculate the proportion of women who said yes to any of the questions on acts of violence, and that we calculate that out of all women who got the question. So the prevalence rate reflects a proportion or a percentage of all women. It is also important to know that when asking about violence, women are asked about 2 time periods. For every act of violence, we ask if it happened ever in her life, no matter how recent or long time ago, and this gives us lifetime prevalence. And we asked if it happened in the last 12 months, and this gives us the current violence rate. So you will see these 2 time periods in many of the results that we present. Why do we need a survey, and why do we not use police or health records, administrative data from service providers to find out how many women experience violence? This is because we know from surveys that only a very few % of women who experience violence report this to service providers. We also know from surveys that women who report violence to authorities in general have experienced more severe forms of violence. Actually, one of the limitations of surveys is that they underestimate the most severe cases. And this is because in surveys we do not find the women who have been murdered or women who are in institutions or in shelters because of violence. And some of these severe cases, however, are recorded in administrative data, for example, in homicide statistics or in shelter records. Even in the best survey, not all women will disclose their experience of violence. So while you do get a robust prevalence rate in a survey, the reality is actually worse than what we can measure in a survey. In the next few slides, I will show some key findings on violence by husbands. As I mentioned, I use the term violence by husbands rather than partner violence because in Vietnam we found that 97% of women with partners actually had been married. As already explained, we looked at physical, sexual, emotional, and economic violence and controlling behaviors by husbands. And in Vietnam, as many as 63% of women had in her lifetime experienced at least one of these 5 forms. You see that on the right side of this graph. Almost 1/3 of women, 32%, had experienced any of these 5 forms of violence in the last 12 months. And that's a whole lot. And looking at the 5 different types of violence by themselves, we see that women were least likely to experience sexual violence, and that's in 30% of women who experienced sexual violence in her lifetime. And women were most likely to experience emotional violence in 47%, or almost half of all women, and have experienced this in her lifetime. In much of the analysis, we used the indicator physical and/or sexual violence by a husband. And this is because it's the most robust indicator that we also use for international comparison. And in Vietnam, 32%, or 1 in every 3 married women, experienced physical and/or sexual violence. And this is similar to the global average. And breaking this down by type of violence, we see that 26%, or 1 in 4, had experienced physical violence, and 13% sexual violence in her lifetime. In the study, we also collected stories, narratives from women who had experienced violence by a husband, and this is one of them. The scar was when he cut me with a push hook, and he cut through the tendon at my ankle, so I had it sewed in the hospital. It was more than 20 years ago. And the scar on my back was when he hit me while I was sleeping. It broke my bone. I still went to school to teach that afternoon. I biked with only one foot. And the traces of this violence are all over my body. My face has been like a map with many lines and paths. The proportions of women who experience violence by a husband vary by location. And in this graph on physical violence, the black bars reflect the lifetime prevalence, and the orange bars reflect prevalence by violence in the last 12 months. And you see, in rural areas, women were more likely to experience physical violence than in urban areas. And we also saw huge regional differences. Women in the Central Highlands were twice as likely to experience physical violence by a husband compared to women in the Southeast or in the Mekong Delta. And we looked at violence by husband among women with disabilities, the orange bars, and compared it with women without disabilities, the black bars in this graph. And for each of the 5 forms of violence, we found that women with disabilities were more likely to have experienced violence compared to women without disabilities. Hoa, who was interviewed for this study, could not walk and was beaten by her blind husband. She could not report the violence because she thought that no one would believe her.
So far, we have spoken about violence against women by their intimate partner. Women also experience violence by non-partners, such as other family members, neighbors, teachers, and people they work with. 1 in 10 women in Vietnam experience physical violence since the age of 15 by someone other than a current or former partner, and only 1% in the last 12 months. Both of these rates were significantly smaller than the proportion of women who experience physical violence by a partner. Most of this non-partner violence was perpetrated by males who were known to the women, such as family members, friends, and colleagues. Sexual violence by non-partners was also lower than rates of sexual violence by a partner, 9% of women in their lifetime and 1% in the last 12 months. Almost all of this sexual violence was perpetrated by males who were not family members, such as a friend, someone at work, or a stranger. Strangers were only mentioned by 1 in 5 sexually abused women, thus illustrating that most abusers are known to women. In the study, we also measured sexual abuse to a woman as a child before they were age 15. Here we can see 4.4% of women did identify that they had experienced sexual violence as a child, and most of this was a person known, such as a family member, friend, or neighbor. Younger women are most at risk of non-partner violence. Women aged between 20 to 24 experience the highest rates of sexual violence by a non-partner since age 15. And those even younger, aged 15 to 19, have the highest rates in the last 12 months. The acts of sexual violence that women experienced by non-partners were mainly attempted forced intercourse or other unwanted sexual acts. Less than 1% of women experienced forced intercourse since the age of 15. For more than 90% of the women who experienced forced sexual intercourse or other unwanted sexual acts, it happened once by one perpetrator. This is in contrast to partner violence, which tends to happen many times over a long period of time. While non-partner sexual violence tends to occur less often than partner violence, it still has quite severe consequences for women and girls. In this section, I will speak about women's coping strategies. What do women do when they experience partner violence? Do they talk about it? Do they seek help? The most common way women cope with the violence is to talk to someone. 43% of women said they spoke with a family member. Some women also told the interviewers they spoke with a friend or a neighbor. However, half of the women who experienced physical and/or sexual violence by a partner had never told anyone about it before being interviewed. Here we have a quote from one of the women who participated in the study talking about help seeking. She says, you know what? My family is far away. Everyone here already knew my case, so I am fed up hiding and continuing to endure. However, I covered up from my brothers and sisters. This woman mentions how she has hidden the violence from her family, and now she is ready to get some help, and she wants to stop hiding the violence. In the survey, we asked women whether they asked for help from formal services like the police or a healthcare professional. 90% of women said they did not ask for help. And those who did ask for help most often went to the police or a people's committee, and a few others went to a local leader. In the qualitative research, women were asked why they did not or would not seek help. Respondents said that women who lived with a partner with partner violence should only ask for help under some circumstances. For example, when the violence is serious or she cannot endure it any longer. They believed that if a woman reported every episode of violence, she would not be respected. So I will now pass back to Henriette.
We have already seen many findings. The big question on everybody's mind is, has violence changed since 2010 when the first study took place? Let's take a look. Here we see the 4 types of violence by a husband in 2010 in black and in 2019 in orange. And these types are physical, sexual, emotional violence and controlling behaviors. And we present lifetime and the last 12 months. And we see that for almost every type, except sexual violence, in 2019, fewer women experienced violence compared to 2010. And this is also true for lifetime and for the last 12 months. For example, for physical violence by a husband, the first group on the left, we see in 2010 that the prevalence rate was 32%, and in 2019 it's lower, 26%. And as I said, the one exception is sexual partner violence or sexual violence by husbands, where we see that the prevalence rates have increased since the last survey. And for lifetime prevalence, it increased from 10 to 13%. Since the pattern for sexual violence is so different compared to the other types of violence, we can speculate if this is a real increase or whether women, after many years of campaigns, are now more open about sexual violence. Whether a real increase or not, when we combine physical and/or sexual violence, in the middle of this graph, we see that the overall picture is one of decrease, from 34% in 2010 to 32% in 2019 for the lifetime prevalence of physical and/or sexual violence. Measuring sexual violence is particularly complex and sensitive, and as I mentioned, an apparent increase could be the result of other factors, such as sexual violence becoming less of a taboo topic. In Vietnam folklore, sex in marriage is proverbial. I paid for the tray, so I should be able to step a hole in the tray. It is possible that women now speak more openly about sex and sexual violence than in the past, in the first survey. We also just saw that fewer women now experience physical violence than in 2010. But overall prevalence rates, which combine all ages, can hide a more complex picture, and digging deeper by breaking it down by age group shows us clearly that women of all ages report that they have experienced less violence now in the last survey, but we also see that the difference is larger among the youngest age groups, those under 40. And there is evidence that we are looking at a generational change. And we also saw this for other types of violence. One of the interviewed women expresses that her husband is not as bad as other men. She said, "Sometimes I also got angry. I could not stand and talk back one or two words, and he would beat me with what he was having in his hand. And he did only that, not like other people using a rod or a stick to beat their wives heavily. He only slapped me or kicked me." We also compared non-partner violence between the two studies, and we saw that the prevalence of all forms of non-partner violence was higher in 2019 compared to 2010. And this was the case for physical and for sexual violence since age 15, and for childhood sexual abuse before age 15. The reported rate of childhood sexual abuse before the age 15 was 4.4% in 2019 compared to 2.8% in the 2010 study. We also compared how women's attitudes on obeying her husband has changed between the two studies, 2010 and 2019. Women were asked if they agreed with the statement, "A good wife obeys her husband even if she disagrees." Surprisingly, in both studies we found exactly the same proportion of women agreeing with the statement, namely 27%. But interestingly, when breaking it down by age groups, we noted a very interesting and consistent pattern. In 2019, If a woman was under 40, she was less likely to agree with the statement than women who were of the same age in 2010. For older women, we saw the reverse. But this is actually positive news, because this shows that the difference in attitudes between generations is increasing, and the younger women nowadays are more inclined to support gender equality.
Good morning, everyone. The effects of violence against women can manifest themselves in so many ways. It can impact her health, her children, and other aspects of daily life. Women might experience direct physical injuries, but also significant impacts on their mental health. The study asked all women about their general health, their mental health, their reproductive health. This allows us to compare the health of women who have had a violent husband against the health of women who have not been in a violent relationship. Let's first look at what the results tell us about the more direct impacts of physical and sexual violence by a husband. Of all the women who experienced physical or sexual violence by a husband, almost 1/4 of them have been injured. As this graph shows, most of the women who have been injured were injured more than once. Nearly half were injured several times by their husband, and for 22% of them, they had injuries more than 5 times. The qualitative research conducted reveals details of some horrific injuries. An example of the impact of violence on reproductive health was given by a woman who had her ovaries severely damaged after being kicked in the stomach by her husband. She had serious bleeding and was admitted to hospital for emergency surgery. All women were asked how they would rate their general health, from very poor through to excellent. There was a clear difference between the proportion of women who said their general health was good or excellent. Only 31% who had ever experienced violence by a husband said their health was good or excellent. For women without violence, a much higher proportion, 42%, rated their health as good or excellent. Looking now at reproductive health, we can see that women with violence, especially women who experience violence during a pregnancy, have consistently higher rates of miscarriage, abortion, and stillbirths. For an example of the impact physical or sexual violence can have on a woman's reproductive health, we only have to think back to the horrible story from moments ago about the woman who suffered a severely damaged ovary when her husband kicked her in the stomach. Research tells us that the impact of violence on children can be significant and can carry forward into adulthood. In this study, we did not interview children, but the women interviewed were asked questions about their children's behaviour, whether children are witnessing violence against their mother, whether the women themselves experience violence as a child, or have a husband who grew up with violence. All women with children in the age that they should go to school were asked whether the children had certain behavioural problems, nightmares, wetting the bed, being quiet or withdrawn, or on the other hand, aggressive. Asking this of all women means we can compare between women with violence and women without violence. The results show consistently that women who have had a violent husband are more likely to mention behavioural issues among their children across all 4 categories, the orange bars. Women with young children who experience physical violence by a husband were also asked if their children ever witnessed or overheard the violence. For more than 60% of those women, the answer was yes. In many cases, children had witnessed violence several or many times. One of the survivors interviewed shared that her youngest son was with her when her husband beat her and stabbed her. The child had to run several times to avoid being injured himself by the knife of his father. As we will see next, being exposed to violence as a child increases the risk of ending up in a violent relationship, either as a victim or a perpetrator. To explore the intergenerational patterns of violent relationships, all women interviewed in the survey were asked whether their mother had been beaten by her husband, whether their husband's mother had been beaten by his father, or if the husband himself had been hit when he was a child. Again, asking this of all women allows us to compare and see the higher rates among women with physical or sexual violence, the orange bars in this graph, compared to the women who said they've never had a violent husband, the black bars. The results show that women who experience violence by a husband were more likely to have been brought up in a violent home or to have a partner who witnessed violence or experienced violence as a child. This shows us that violence runs in families and is a learned behaviour. Having so much valuable data on women's experiences with violence, combined with information about their family situation, their living situation, it's possible to use statistical modelling to predict the factors that might influence the risk of experiencing violence. Almost 40 different characteristics were explored in this risk factor analysis. Factors for the women included age, ethnic group, education and attitudes. Factors for the men also include whether he drinks alcohol, if he grew up in a violent home, etc. Factors for their relationship included age difference, income difference, number of children, socioeconomic status, assets index. Finally, it also explored if where she lived had an impact on her risk of violence. All of this is used in the logistic regression analysis to reveal which characteristics are statistically linked to her currently experiencing physical and/or sexual violence by a husband. The factors that were independently related to the risk of violence were, from the women's side, low level of education. Also, having a tolerant attitude towards wife beating came out as a risk factor for women. The strongest risk factors, however, were not from the women's side, but from the husband's, and were related to masculine behaviour and with his experiences of violence. These included alcohol use, fighting with other men, and extramarital relationships, all expressions of harmful masculinity. Moreover, if the husband had experienced violence as a child, this was also a significant risk factor for violence against his wife. At the relationship level, women who contributed more financially than their husbands were at significantly higher risk of violence. Also, poverty was significantly associated with higher violence. Finally, a look at how these risk factors have changed since the last study in 2010. Most of the risk factors have remained the same between the two studies. There were some differences though. While in 2010 we found that a husband's education and age, having children and the region in which she lived had an impact on women's risk of partner violence. In 2019, these factors were no longer risk factors. In summary, little has changed in Vietnam in terms of the risk factors placing women at higher risk of violence by their partners. In both studies, the strongest associations with violence by a husband were with the behavioural characteristics of the husband and with his own experiences of violence.
The study also estimated the economic costs of intimate partner violence. 3 types of costs were estimated. Out-of-pocket expenditures, which are the expenditures that women incur to mitigate the consequences of intimate partner violence. For example, getting medical treatment, seeking legal help, leaving home, or repairing or replacing damaged property. Second is the indirect cost or income loss to households because women, and sometimes their husbands, do miss paid work after incidents of violence. And women are unable to do their household and reproductive tasks, which is also known as care work. The third cost is productivity loss for the economy, which arises from the fact that women experiencing violence are often work irregularly, have less focus while at work, and even drop out of the labor force entirely. The most significant cause of intimate partner violence is productivity loss, which is measured as the income differential between women experiencing violence and those not experiencing violence. Working women in Vietnam who ever experienced physical or sexual violence had, on average, 30.8% lower income than women not experiencing violence. This translates into an overall productivity loss of more than 100,000 billion Vietnamese dong, which is equivalent to 1.81% of the 2018 GDP. Out-of-pockets also are a significant cost. Women are losing about a quarter of their annual income on costs associated with healthcare, leaving home, or replacing or repairing damaged property. In terms of income loss, 1 in 10 working women who experienced physical and/or sexual violence missed work on average for about 8 days. This shows us that the economic costs of intimate partner violence are significant and need to be considered when planning responses to address violence against women.
Thank you to my colleagues for their presentations. As we've seen in the results today, partner and non-partner violence against women affects many women and girls in Vietnam with grave consequences for them and their families. The consistency and quality of results for both studies, 2010 and 2019, makes this extremely valuable evidence for policy and action. The results show slight but consistent improvements across almost every measure since the last study 9 years ago. In the next minutes, I will summarize the main conclusions and end with recommendations that follow the findings. Once a woman experiences violence, it stays with her for her lifetime. Change in lifetime prevalence rates takes time, usually a few generations. But there's indication that change is happening in Vietnam. Fewer women experienced partner violence in 2019 than in 2010. When examining differences by type of violence, this was true for every type of violence except sexual violence. Young women in 2019 experienced less partner violence compared with young women in 2010. Even if attitudes have changed little since 2010, in 2019, fewer younger women believed that a good wife should obey her husband even if she disagrees. The 2019 results suggest that generational change is beginning in Vietnam. This is a very positive, good news story. However, some groups of women are at higher risk of violence. Women with disabilities, women living in rural areas, and women with husbands who exhibit harmful masculine behavior, or husbands who lived as a child in a violent household. Overall, partner violence has been experienced by far more women than non-partner violence. The main messages we can take away from the study is that partner violence has significant consequences on women's health, economic productivity, and well-being. The economic costs of violence were substantial. Women who experienced partner violence in the past 12 months spent about a quarter of their annual income on costs associated with the violence, and national productivity losses are estimated at 1.8% of GDP. Women in violent relationships often felt they had no option but to endure the violence. And since 2010, help-seeking behavior has not changed. Women generally sought help when they could not endure the violence anymore. This is a quote from one woman who spoke about help. "My family is far away. As I married a husband from far location, I have to endure. How can I get angry?" We have used the results to develop 4 primary recommendations in collaboration with our Vietnamese colleagues. First of all is to strengthen national commitment and action, the policy response. This can only be done by increasing monitoring and tracking of national policies and laws on gender equality and prevention responses to gender-based violence. We've suggested amending and revising existing national policies and laws where they are not working or they're not sufficient. Suggest an area where much work needs to be done is to understand barriers to help seeking and the opportunities to change those views. Social barriers that discourage women from discussing their experiences of partner violence and seeking help need to be challenged. It is crucial to strengthen interventions focused on women and girls, men and boys, and tap into family and community support networks. We've suggested introducing policies to promote prevention and responses to gender-based violence with a focus on young people. Whatever policies and programs are implemented, change will take time, and therefore we should ensure adequate and sustained resources are allocated. To ensure this work is done in a coherent and meaningful way, a state agency on gender equality should lead coordination of prevention and response work. The second recommendation is to promote violence prevention. We can do this by recognizing the links between gender-based violence and gender equality. That is, develop and implement and monitor programs aimed at the prevention of gender-based violence by promoting gender equality through public awareness, by involving local communities, through the education system. And the second step would be to maximize intersectoral coordination and collaboration to continue to substantially empower women. This would include things like life skills training, self-help groups, education, job training, etc. The third recommendation is to develop and deploy appropriate, effective, and high-quality response and intervention solutions. Some examples are to increase and coordinate multi-sectoral engagement, such as with community leaders and local authorities. We suggest it's time to review current models of intervention and ask whether these are appropriate and sufficient. Essential services packages for gender-based violence prevention and response are in place in Vietnam. Now is a good time to review and strengthen those packages to ensure treatment and support is accessible and affordable to everyone in Vietnam. It's a good time to evaluate progress of responses by different sectors, such as the health system. It's recommended to continue to strengthen the capacity of the police and judicial system to implement policies and legislation. And strengthen the capacity of relevant officers of MOLISA to increase effective coordination of prevention and response to gender-based violence. The fourth recommendation, and the final recommendation, is to continue supporting research, data collection, collaboration to address gender-based violence. While the second prevalence survey has been successfully completed, it is valuable for planning the next stages of action. This study also raises important questions to be answered. It's a good time to review and invest in international best practice bystander and perpetrator programs for intervening and stopping violence, with a view to adapt and trial programs in Vietnam. would also be useful to promote the 2010 and 2019 studies by making the data available to the research community in Vietnam and beyond. This encourages the use of the data for further research. Also suggests that additional research can strengthen the evidence base to improve policies, laws, and quality of services on prevention and response to gender-based violence that is relevant for Vietnam. To conclude, we acknowledge the women who shared their sensitive stories and the many people who worked intensively to bring this data to life. I'm about to show you a very quick summary of all the names of everyone involved in the research study to illustrate how large the study team has been. Thank you all for your interest in this very important study for Vietnam.
Thank you so much.
Thưa quý vị, bây giờ có hai thông tin thế này xin được phép chia sẻ rất ngắn với quý vị. Thứ nhất là tất cả những con số, những thông tin trong những báo cáo của các chuyên gia trong nước và quốc tế chúng tôi vừa đưa với quý vị từ phần đầu chương trình đến giờ thì chúng tôi đã nén lại trong một cái link mà bây giờ để truy cập vào cái link đó thì rất đơn giản, quý vị có thể quét mã QR code mà chúng tôi có đính kèm trong tờ chương trình ở trên từng bàn của quý vị ở phía dưới bên tay phải trong cái tờ chương trình ạ. Vâng, xin cảm ơn quý vị. Và thứ hai đó là như quý vị cũng biết thì trong cuộc điều tra của chúng ta, ekip thực hiện cuộc điều tra này đã tiếp cận được với 6.000 người phụ nữ từ 15 đến 64 tuổi. Và trong đó thì chúng tôi có chọn ra được 5 câu chuyện điển hình nhất và cũng thuyết phục những người phụ nữ trong 5 câu chuyện điển hình đó.
And we have formed a series of pictures, an album. And currently, in 50 minutes, there won't be 50 minutes for break. Please use these 50 minutes to thank the stories of all the albums. And then after 50 minutes, please come back. Now 15 minutes for tea break and for you to look at the exhibition of those stories outside. Thank you so much.
Tôi còn nhớ lần đầu tiên tôi bị anh nắm tóc đập đầu vào giường trong phòng ngủ của hai đứa. Lúc đó tôi choáng váng và xá sẩm hết mặt mày. Nghĩ lại lúc đó thì thấy mình dài quá. Nếu là bây giờ tôi sẽ không im lặng. Tôi về nhà ở với bố mẹ. Tôi đã hiểu biết hơn về pháp luật, bảo vệ những người như tôi nói riêng và phụ nữ nói chung không bị bạo lực.
Hàng trăm bức ảnh, hàng trăm số phận, tất cả cùng gặp nhau ở một điểm. Họ, những người phụ nữ, phải đối diện với bạo lực. Nhưng không phải ai cũng tiếp tục chịu đựng. Có những người đã hành động để giải thoát bản thân, giành lại cuộc sống tự chủ cho mình.
Tới thời điểm này, tôi khẳng định rằng là Việt Nam là một quốc gia đầu tiên trên thế giới đã tiến hành cuộc điều tra lần 2 này. Qua 10 năm thì cái sự cởi mở, cái sự tiến bộ của phụ nữ và cái nhận thức đối với phụ nữ về cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ này nó có cái sự thay đổi rất lớn, rất lớn. Họ sẵn sàng chia sẻ và họ sẵn sàng đấu tranh, phản bác, phê phán và thậm chí là họ sẵn sàng là tố giác đối với cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ.
First and foremost, UNFPA has a corporate vision to address gender-based violence in different countries in the world. We call it transformative agenda to eliminate violence against women and girls, and as well as other harmful practices. We also aim at achieving zero maternal deaths and zero unmet need for family planning. So we have that corporate mandate to do that. So in Vietnam in 2009 and 2010, we have provided support to conduct the first ever survey on gender-based violence for Vietnam. Nearly 10 years later, now it's time to see what change has taken place and what didn't change, and what are the gaps that we still need to address. And this is a fundamental part of it, because such evidence and data are essential for the country's policy making, budget allocation, and program development.
Australia is deeply committed to ending gender-based violence. We immediately agreed to support the government of Vietnam in its second national survey on violence against women and girls. Australia has supported 12 such national prevalence surveys across the Asia-Pacific region to date. We do this because it enables us all to acknowledge just how many lives are affected by violence, coercive control and harassment.
Chấm dứt bạo lực cần phải là ưu tiên hàng đầu của mỗi quốc gia trên toàn thế giới nhằm đạt được mục tiêu phát triển bền vững số 5 về bình đẳng giới. Ở Việt Nam, số liệu và các bằng chứng về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ là cơ sở quan trọng cho các quyết định hành động. Cuộc điều tra quốc gia lần thứ 2 về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ được tiến hành năm 2018-2019 nhằm đo lường về mức độ phổ biến của bạo lực đối với phụ nữ ở Việt Nam và các yếu tố có liên quan để xây dựng chính sách quốc gia, các can thiệp về phòng chống bạo lực trên cơ sở giới, góp phần thúc đẩy tiến bộ phụ nữ và bình đẳng giới ở Việt Nam. Điều tra quốc gia về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ ở Việt Nam năm 2019 do Bộ Lao động Thương binh và Xã hội phối hợp với Tổng cục Thống kê, Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư với sự hỗ trợ kỹ thuật và tài chính của Quỹ Dân số Liên Hợp Quốc UNFPA và Bộ Ngoại giao và Thương mại Australia tại Việt Nam. Gần 6.000 phụ nữ trong độ tuổi 15 đến 64 được phỏng vấn đã cho thấy ở Việt Nam, đa số bạo lực mà người phụ nữ phải chịu đều do chồng hoặc bạn tình gây ra. Bất bình đẳng giới vừa là nguyên nhân cơ bản, vừa là hậu quả của hầu hết bạo lực đối với phụ nữ.
Thế thì bên cạnh việc kế thừa những cái nội dung của điều tra lần trước, thì lần này trong cuộc điều tra lần này thì chúng tôi cũng mở rộng ra thêm một số thông tin khác để đáp ứng cái nhu cầu nghiên cứu hiện nay. Ví dụ như liên quan đến cái là vấn đề liên quan thiệt hại do bạo lực gây ra.
Trong nghiên cứu lần này vì nó là một cái nghiên cứu quốc gia và vai trò của các tổ chức xã hội, thì chúng tôi đóng góp cái ý kiến cho cái việc là để giúp nhà nước và các cái cơ quan nghiên cứu quốc gia làm sao có cái bộ câu hỏi nó phản ánh đúng được những cái vấn đề mà đang diễn ra trong xã hội.
Nó là vấn đề về an toàn và đạo đức nghiên cứu. Làm sao đảm bảo được cái không gian riêng tư, làm sao đảm bảo được cái việc phỏng vấn đã an toàn nhất. Nạn nhân hoặc là người trả lời khi họ chia sẻ thì họ quay về được an toàn, cũng như là đội điều tra khi mà phỏng vấn xong cũng được an toàn, vì vấn đề rất nhạy cảm.
Tôi 46 tuổi, đang ở thời kỳ tiền mãn kinh, rất khó chịu, không muốn quan hệ tình dục. Nhưng chồng tôi vẫn ép quan hệ và luôn nghi ngờ tôi ngoại tình khi anh ấy không quan hệ được. Có hôm tôi vừa vén màn chui vào giường là đã thấy anh ta rút dao kề vào cổ. Lúc đó chỉ quỳ xuống van xin để anh hết giận. Tôi đã báo cáo với chính quyền. Chính quyền đã đến mấy lần giải quyết, nhưng chỉ được vài hôm. Tôi đang rất cần giúp đỡ.
Bạo lực do chồng hoặc bạn tình hoặc người khác gây ra đã ảnh hưởng đến nhiều phụ nữ ở Việt Nam với những hậu quả nghiêm trọng gây ra cho phụ nữ và gia đình họ. Tỷ lệ phụ nữ phải chịu các hình thức bạo lực khác nhau ở Việt Nam vẫn ở mức cao.
Y tế thì chỉ làm nhiệm vụ chăm sóc sức khỏe. Thế sau đấy thì có thể chúng tôi có tư vấn, có hỗ trợ một chút. Nhưng rõ ràng là đối với những nạn nhân mà bị bạo hành như vậy thì cái tổn thương về tâm lý nó rất là dai dẳng, lâu dài, thậm chí có thể kéo nó suốt đời. Cái nạn nhân bị bạo hành đấy quay trở lại với cuộc sống bình thường thực sự là khó khăn. Cho nên rõ ràng là cần phải sự chung tay của cả cộng đồng.
Đây là một điều tra hết sức là khoa học, khách quan, có cái cơ sở về mặt lý luận, cơ sở về mặt thực tiễn giúp cho các cơ quan trong quá trình xây dựng và hoàn thiện cái hệ thống chính sách pháp luật về cái phòng chống bạo lực đối với phụ nữ. Kỳ vọng lớn đó, chúng tôi đang xây dựng cái đề án phòng ngừa và ứng phó với bạo lực trên cơ sở giới giai đoạn 2021-2025 và làm thế nào khắc phục cho bằng được những cái mặt còn bất cập, những vấn đề mà chúng tôi thấy rằng trong qua điều tra lần này đó thì nó còn là những cái điểm chưa tiến bộ thì chúng ta phải khắc phục.
Chính phủ Việt Nam đã cam kết việc thực hiện các mục tiêu trong cái chương trình hành động hay chương trình nghị sự 2030 về sự phát triển bền vững của Liên Hợp Quốc. Thế thì đối với nội dung này đây chúng ta biết là những thông tin gắn với lại cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ thì thường nó gắn kết và cũng là một nội dung trong các cái hệ thống chỉ tiêu, các thông tin về cái SDG, VSDG cũng như là các chỉ tiêu về phát triển giới. Có thể nói đây là cái hệ thống chỉ tiêu nó gắn chặt với nhau.
We know that data collection is critical to an adequate and compassionate response. It enables us to shine a light on how we can better act to end violence. Each piece of data in this survey represents the experience of a Vietnamese woman or girl, whether at home, at work, or in a public place. This report means that we hear them, we believe them, and we can act. Báo cáo này là bằng chứng cho thấy chúng ta lắng nghe họ, chúng ta tin tưởng họ, và chúng ta cần phải hành động.
Violence against women is never accepted.
Bạo lực đối với phụ nữ không bao giờ được chấp nhận.
Bạo lực đối với phụ nữ không bao giờ được chấp nhận.
It's preventable and we all must commit to zero tolerance for any forms of violence. Take action. Stop violence against women and girls now.
Hãy hành động.
Speak out.
Lên tiếng.
Share.
Sẻ chia.
Take action.
Hành động.
Help.
Chở che.
Protect.
Bảo vệ.
Together, we create a future.
Cùng nhau,
chúng ta tạo nên một tương lai.
A world.
Một thế giới.
Một thế giới.
No violence against women and girls.
Phụ nữ và trẻ em gái
không còn bị bạo hành.
Cùng nhau, chúng ta tạo nên một tương lai, một thế giới, phụ nữ và trẻ em gái không còn bị bạo hành.
Tôi còn nhớ lần đầu tiên tôi bị anh nắm tóc đập đầu vào giường trong phòng ngủ của hai đứa. Lúc đó tôi choáng váng và xá sẩm hết mặt mày. Nghĩ lại lúc đó thì thấy mình dài quá. Nếu là bây giờ tôi sẽ không im lặng. Tôi về nhà ở với bố mẹ. Tôi đã hiểu biết hơn về pháp luật, bảo vệ những người như tôi nói riêng và phụ nữ nói chung không bị bạo lực.
Hàng trăm bức ảnh, hàng trăm số phận, tất cả cùng gặp nhau ở một điểm. Họ, những người phụ nữ, phải đối diện với bạo lực. Nhưng không phải ai cũng tiếp tục chịu đựng. Có những người đã hành động để giải thoát bản thân, giành lại cuộc sống tự chủ cho mình.
Tới thời điểm này, tôi khẳng định rằng là Việt Nam là một quốc gia đầu tiên trên thế giới đã tiến hành cuộc điều tra lần 2 này. Qua 10 năm đó, thì cái sự cởi mở, cái sự tiến bộ của phụ nữ và cái nhận thức đối với phụ nữ về cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ này nó có cái sự thay đổi rất lớn, rất lớn. Họ sẵn sàng chia sẻ và họ sẵn sàng đấu tranh, phản bác, phê phán và thậm chí là họ sẵn sàng là tố giác đối với cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ.
First and foremost, UNFPA has a corporate vision to address gender-based violence in different countries in the world. We call it transformative agenda to eliminate violence against women and girls, and as well as other harmful practices. We also aim at achieving zero maternal deaths and zero unmet need for family planning. So we have that corporate mandate to do that. So in Vietnam in 2009 and 2010, we have provided support to conduct the first ever survey on gender-based violence for Vietnam. Nearly 10 years later, now it's time to see what change has taken place and what didn't change, and what are the gaps that we still need to address. And this is a fundamental part of it, because such evidence and data are essential for the country's policy making, budget allocation, and program development.
Australia is deeply committed to ending gender-based violence. We immediately agreed to support the government of Vietnam in its second national survey on violence against women and girls. Australia has supported 12 such national prevalence surveys across the Asia-Pacific region to date. We do this because it enables us all to acknowledge just how many lives are affected by violence, coercive control and harassment.
Chấm dứt bạo lực cần phải là ưu tiên hàng đầu của mỗi quốc gia trên toàn thế giới nhằm đạt được mục tiêu phát triển bền vững số 5 về bình đẳng giới. Ở Việt Nam, số liệu và các bằng chứng về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ là cơ sở quan trọng cho các quyết định hành động. Cuộc điều tra quốc gia lần thứ 2 về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ được tiến hành năm 2018-2019 nhằm đo lường về mức độ phổ biến của bạo lực đối với phụ nữ ở Việt Nam và các yếu tố có liên quan để xây dựng chính sách quốc gia, các can thiệp về phòng chống bạo lực trên cơ sở giới, góp phần thúc đẩy tiến bộ phụ nữ và bình đẳng giới ở Việt Nam. Điều tra quốc gia về bạo lực đối với phụ nữ ở Việt Nam năm 2019 do Bộ Lao động Thương binh và Xã hội phối hợp với Tổng cục Thống kê, Bộ Kế hoạch và Đầu tư với sự hỗ trợ kỹ thuật và tài chính của Quỹ Dân số Liên Hợp Quốc UNFPA và Bộ Ngoại giao và Thương mại Australia tại Việt Nam. Gần 6.000 phụ nữ trong độ tuổi 15 đến 64 được phỏng vấn đã cho thấy ở Việt Nam, đa số bạo lực mà người phụ nữ phải chịu đều do chồng hoặc bạn tình gây ra. Bất bình đẳng giới vừa là nguyên nhân cơ bản, vừa là hậu quả của hầu hết bạo lực đối với phụ nữ.
Thế thì bên cạnh việc kế thừa những cái nội dung của điều tra lần trước, thì lần này trong cuộc điều tra lần này thì chúng tôi cũng mở rộng ra thêm một số thông tin khác để đáp ứng cái nhu cầu nghiên cứu hiện nay. Ví dụ như là liên quan đến cái là vấn đề liên quan thiệt hại do bạo lực gây ra.
Trong nghiên cứu lần này vì nó là một cái nghiên cứu quốc gia và vai trò của các tổ chức xã hội thì chúng tôi đóng góp cái ý kiến cho cái việc là để giúp nhà nước và các cái cơ quan nghiên cứu quốc gia làm sao có cái bộ câu hỏi nó phản ánh đúng được những cái vấn đề mà đang diễn ra trong xã hội.
Nó là vấn đề về an toàn và đạo đức nghiên cứu. Làm sao đảm bảo được cái không gian riêng tư, làm sao đảm bảo được cái việc phỏng vấn đã an toàn nhất. Nạn nhân hoặc là người trả lời khi họ chia sẻ thì họ quay về được an toàn, cũng như là đội điều tra khi mà phỏng vấn xong cũng được an toàn, vì vấn đề rất nhạy cảm.
Tôi 46 tuổi, đang ở thời kỳ tiền mãn kinh, rất khó chịu, không muốn quan hệ tình dục. Nhưng chồng tôi vẫn ép quan hệ và luôn nghi ngờ tôi ngoại tình khi anh ấy không quan hệ được. Có hôm tôi vừa vén màn chui vào giường là đã thấy anh ta rút dao kề vào cổ. Lúc đó chỉ quỳ xuống van xin để anh hết giận. Tôi đã báo cáo với chính quyền. Chính quyền đã đến mấy lần giải quyết, nhưng chỉ được vài hôm. Tôi đang rất cần giúp đỡ.
Bạo lực do chồng hoặc bạn tình hoặc người khác gây ra đã ảnh hưởng đến nhiều phụ nữ ở Việt Nam với những hậu quả nghiêm trọng gây ra cho phụ nữ và gia đình họ. Tỷ lệ phụ nữ phải chịu các hình thức bạo lực khác nhau ở Việt Nam vẫn ở mức cao.
Y tế thì chỉ làm nhiệm vụ chăm sóc sức khỏe. Thế sau đấy thì có thể chúng tôi có tư vấn, có hỗ trợ một chút. Nhưng rõ ràng là đối với những nạn nhân mà bị bạo hành như vậy thì cái tổn thương về tâm lý nó rất là dai dẳng, lâu dài, thậm chí có thể kéo nó suốt đời. Cái nạn nhân bị bạo hành đấy quay trở lại với cuộc sống bình thường thực sự là khó khăn. Cho nên rõ ràng là cần phải sự chung tay của cả cộng đồng.
Đây là một điều tra hết sức là khoa học, khách quan, có cái cơ sở về mặt lý luận, cơ sở về mặt thực tiễn giúp cho các cơ quan trong quá trình xây dựng và hoàn thiện cái hệ thống chính sách pháp luật về cái phòng chống bạo lực đối với phụ nữ. Kỳ vọng lớn đó, chúng tôi đang xây dựng cái đề án phòng ngừa và ứng phó với bạo lực trên cơ sở giới giai đoạn 2021-2025 và làm thế nào khắc phục cho bằng được những cái mặt còn bất cập, những vấn đề mà chúng tôi thấy rằng trong qua điều tra lần này đó thì nó còn là những cái điểm chưa tiến bộ thì chúng ta phải khắc phục.
Chính phủ Việt Nam đã cam kết việc thực hiện các mục tiêu trong cái chương trình hành động hay chương trình nghị sự 2030 về sự phát triển bền vững của Liên Hợp Quốc. Thế thì đối với nội dung này đây chúng ta biết là những thông tin gắn với lại cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ thì thường thường nó gắn kết và cũng là một nội dung trong các cái hệ thống chỉ tiêu, các thông tin về cái SDG, Viet cũng như là các chỉ tiêu về phát triển giới. Có thể nói đây là cái hệ thống chỉ tiêu nó gắn chặt với nhau.
We know that data collection is critical to an adequate and compassionate response. It enables us to shine a light on how we can better act to end violence. Each piece of data in this survey represents the experience of a Vietnamese woman or girl, whether at home, at work, or in a public place. This report means that we hear them, we believe them, and we can act. Báo cáo này là bằng chứng cho thấy chúng ta lắng nghe họ, chúng ta tin tưởng họ, và chúng ta cần phải hành động.
Violence against women is never accepted.
Bạo lực đối với phụ nữ không bao giờ được chấp nhận.
Bạo lực đối với phụ nữ không bao giờ được chấp nhận.
It's preventable and we all must commit to zero tolerance for any forms of violence. Take action. Stop violence against women and girls now.
Hãy hành động.
Speak out.
Lên tiếng.
Share.
Sẻ chia.
Take action.
Hành động.
Help.
Chở che.
Protect.
Bảo vệ.
Together, we create a future.
Cùng nhau,
chúng ta tạo nên một tương lai.
A world.
Một thế giới.
Một thế giới.
No violence against women and girls.
Phụ nữ và trẻ em gái
không còn bị bạo hành.
Cùng nhau, chúng ta tạo nên một tương lai, một thế giới, phụ nữ và trẻ em gái không còn bị bạo hành.
Tôi còn nhớ lần đầu tiên tôi bị anh nắm tóc đập đầu vào giường trong phòng ngủ của hai đứa. Lúc đó tôi choáng váng và xá sẩm hết mặt mày. Nghĩ lại lúc đó thì thấy mình dài quá. Nếu là bây giờ tôi sẽ không im lặng. Tôi về nhà ở với bố mẹ. Tôi đã hiểu biết hơn về pháp luật, bảo vệ những người như tôi nói riêng và phụ nữ nói chung không bị bạo lực.
Hàng trăm bức ảnh, hàng trăm số phận, tất cả cùng gặp nhau ở một điểm. Họ, những người phụ nữ, phải đối diện với bạo lực. Nhưng không phải ai cũng tiếp tục chịu đựng. Có những người đã hành động để giải thoát bản thân, giành lại cuộc sống tự chủ cho mình.
Tới thời điểm này, tôi khẳng định rằng là Việt Nam là một quốc gia đầu tiên trên thế giới đã tiến hành cuộc điều tra lần 2 này. Qua 10 năm đó, thì cái sự cởi mở, cái sự tiến bộ của phụ nữ và cái nhận thức đối với phụ nữ về cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ này nó có cái sự thay đổi rất lớn, rất lớn. Họ sẵn sàng chia sẻ và họ sẵn sàng đấu tranh, phản bác, phê phán và thậm chí là họ sẵn sàng là tố giác đối với cái bạo lực đối với phụ nữ.
First and foremost, UNFPA has a corporate vision to address the gender-based violence.
Nên cuộc điều tra vừa rồi sẽ trực tiếp có những ý kiến chia sẻ rồi là trả lời những câu hỏi của quý vị nếu có. Tuy nhiên trước khi đến với phần hỏi đáp đó thì chúng tôi bây giờ
your queries and questions, if any. And before we come to the Q&A session, please look at the screen for the clip on the report.
In different countries in the world, we call it transformative agenda.
Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu,
Ladies and
vừa rồi
gentlemen,
thì với clip
with the clip,
5 phút vừa rồi các quý vị đại biểu đã thấy được những cái số liệu
we have just listened and seen the very highlighted data in the national study on violence against women in 2019, the report of this study, and in order to clarify the information and also for the queries related to the study, now we will come to the Q&A session. We would like to invite representatives of the participating agencies of the study to answer your questions and queries. For the online delegates, we will collect your questions and transfer to the related agencies and organizations and consultants. And now I would like to invite representative of Molisa, Mr. Phạm Ngọc Tiến, Director General of Gender Equality Department, Ms. Naomi Kitahari, UNFPA rep in Vietnam, Madam Hoàng Tú Anh, representative of CICIP, to the stage for the sharing. Ladies and gentlemen, to join our Q&A session now, we also invite the international consultants through Zoom. And we have Dr. Christine Wimmer of Melbourne University, Dr. Herika Jensen, the technical advisor of UNPA Asia Pacific region, Jessica Gardner, consultant of Nova Raptap, and also we have representative of the Island University joining our Q&A session. To have the questions for the Q&A session, we can raise the question directly here, or you can also send the written questions to the organizer, and the program is now live on both the two English and Vietnamese channels for your questions. And now we would like to invite all the representatives to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just collected several comments and also compliments and questions from the delegates joining our conference online. And before we have the questions from the on-site delegates, we would like to transfer the questions to the four representatives on the stage. The first question goes to Madame Naomi Kitahara, UNFPA rep in Vietnam, from a delegate joining online. First, we would like to congratulate UNFPA, Molisa, and also other relevant stakeholders joining this. UNFPA plays a very key role in terms of technical assistance to this activity. So what are the activities that you have implemented to ensure and to address the issues of violence against women and also to meet the international standards?
Vâng, ngay từ ban đầu trong sự kiện ngày hôm nay thì đã có một số những cái cột mốc mà chúng tôi đã đưa ra từ phía UNFPA. UNFPA chúng tôi đưa ra hỗ trợ kỹ thuật trong toàn bộ cái quá trình điều tra này và bắt đầu từ cái sự kiện khởi động. Và sau đó là một loạt công tác chuẩn bị, những cái giai đoạn chuẩn bị của điều tra này.
Localizing that questionnaires and pre-testing just to make sure that everything goes well, training of the interviewers, and data collection, consistency check, analysis, writing a report, and preparing other documentations to make sure that those can be easily digested by the readers. And so it's the entire survey process that the UNFPA was providing support for to Molisa and GSO. and that was the role of UNFPA. We do this in many countries in the world. Still there are, Vietnam has conducted this survey for the second time, but the many countries in the world still have not even done the survey yet. And the UNFPA as an organization is trying to help countries in different continents to make sure that this data is collected. Because of the experience we had before, when we talk about gender-based violence, people will react to say, really? Isn't that just your impression? Or you're just talking about nonsense? Or you're just coming up with the stories from nowhere? So we heard this many times, and because of that, we thought that without evidence and without showing evidence, we cannot actually convince a lot of people, especially the country's decision and the policymakers in the world. And then that is the intent of UNFPA providing technical and financial support to the entire process.
Vâng ạ, xin cảm ơn bà Nami đã có những chia sẻ rất là cụ thể về cái sự hỗ trợ kỹ thuật của UNPA trong việc
comments on UNFPA technical support to ensure the international standards of this survey, of this study. We received a question from representative. This question for Mr. Phạm Ngọc Tiến. Are you surprised by the results disclosed today? When the female victims after 10 years didn't change a lot according to the results of the surveys, and even some data was not improved. For example, not seeking help from survivors to the public services. And in addition, can you share that does Molisa have a plan to use the findings of the study in the future to improve policies and intervention programs to ensure better support to the survivors? Yeah, a very hard question for Molisa, but thank you for the question. I think this is a surprise, but we are not too surprised by the findings because during the last 10 years, there have been changes, the awareness change regarding gender equality and gender-based violence. And in the reports, as well as the comments or the presentation from the consultants, you can see very clearly that women are now open. So you can see that the figure on sexual violence has increased during their lifetime. Maybe 10 years ago we asked, they didn't reveal, but now they reveal the truth. So in the proposal of the report, the consultant should have deeper analysis in different aspects or dimensions of the issues to find out the causes, the root causes, so that we can see the findings of our study. Although we have changes, some certain changes or significant changes in awareness, but you know that from awareness to behavior is a long road. Maybe we have a lack of services or the quality of services. That's why we haven't met the needs of the survivors to seek for the services. Maybe they are not aware of the services, or when they seek for the services haven't met their needs. So in order to remedy the situation, we are piloting. Last month, we opened the Social Work Center in Quảng Ninh, a model with the support funding from COICA together with UNFPA in Vietnam. We conducted the lighthouse, the Sun Lighthouse, for women and girls subject to violence. There, we will have the procedures mentioned in the proposal. Women and children, women and girls will get the better support there. So I talk about the gap between the awareness and practices, which is still wide. We guided a lot, and the Social Work Center of Hanoi has accepted the survivors of violence right in Hanoi City. But when we came to them, we approached them. They received all the information, but they only promised that we will coordinate or collaborate when you need regarding legal issues or other issues. But then the survivors ignore she didn't keep the promise, and she didn't prosecute or didn't agree on the prosecution of the perpetrator. So you can see that there are still a lot of barriers related to the hesitations of reporting, or some family issues or children issues. So they are not ready. They do not dare to report, although they know that it will be beneficial to themselves. So from the findings of the study, we see it is really valuable for us using the findings. I talked to our colleagues during the tea break and the media people regarding the economic costs in 2018. Through the survey, through the study, we can see that it's equal to 100,000 billion VND. It's equal to 1.81 percent of GDP. If we invest in the resources for gender-based violence prevention response, we can reduce the costs. No investment is effective. Is more effective than the investment for gender equality and elimination of gender-based violence. So with the valuable contributions of DFAT through UNFPA and UN Women, we are developing the National Strategy on Gender Equality 2021-2030, and then the Scheme on Gender-Based Violence Prevention and Control 2021-2025. They are very useful and significant data so that we can provide input to the national strategy and the scheme. I hope we can have the best, the most effective solution to meet the needs and aspirations of the people in social security in particular. Thank you. The response from Mr. Tien. In our meeting hall, do you have any question for our panelists? International consultants, are you ready to answer all the questions of the participants related to the content of the study? I hope you are ready. Now, one question from a participant. I'm Lê Hồng Loan. I'm from the UNICEF. First of all, I would like to congratulate Molisa, GSO, UNFPA, and the Australian Embassy in Vietnam, and the consultant team to have professionally conducted the study to provide the inputs for policy making on violence against women and children. There's a question that these statistics are very important. In fact, we lack data on child abuse, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. Currently, the government is paying much attention to these issues. We see a very important figure here. It is 4.4% of the women in this study said that they had sexual abuse before 15, and this figure has increased as compared with the first study in 2010. So can I ask a question for the international consultant or national consultant that during the process of conducting the study, what kind of information or comments did you get around this figure, as well as the recommendations related to strengthening the data on child sexual abuse? Because the official statistic from Vietnam government is only 1,500, but we expect that it should be more than 1 million. So there's a big gap between the reported statistics and the real number. Is there any further questions so that we can collect them all before our consultants will give the answers? I have two questions. Em bảo nói to lên được không? Nói bé quá. Tiếng ấy. A Vietnamese woman, she was taught to be patient, to be hardworking. So this is the overall image for a Vietnamese woman who is hardworking at home and at work. I have a question. Whether this concept, which were taught to the women, for example, the four virtues or ethics for women, will they affect awareness, mindsets, or the solutions on gender equality and gender-based violence? Because our government and the Vietnamese women, have different image as compared with the awareness that we want them to change to. So in the report, we've seen the two groups, partner and non-partners. So what about the non-partner? Should we divide into the violence at work and violence at home? Regarding the violence in the workplace, does the government have any survey? I thought that there was in 2012 in the revised labor code, there was something related to violence, but till now I haven't heard any separate survey, national one. So for the first question on child sexual abuse in Vietnam, I would like international consultants to share their comments. And your second question is related to the concept of being a woman, the roles of women in recent year in relation to violence. I would like Ms. Thúy Anh to answer this question because she has interviewed a lot of women in the community. She will share with you the stories. The third question is related to why we selected the age range from 15 to 64 for the study. And then it's related a bit to the violence of children, among children, violence against children before the age of 15. So we divided into partner and non-partner. Did you divide among the non-partner into the location of violence, for example, at school or at work? Under the section of non-partner violence. So we have a question for international consultant and one question for Ms. Du Anh from CC. So international consultant, can you share your response to the questions?
Good morning, everybody.
Vâng, xin kính
Can
chào
you
tất
hear
cả
me?
mọi người.
Yes, yes, we hear you very clearly.
I would like to answer to the question from UNICEF. To measure sexual abuse in childhood, we asked women to answer questions on their experience of sexual abuse before they were age 15. So, as you know, we did not interview any children in this survey, but only the women, the adult women, the women over 15 who answered in the survey, answered about their childhood. The question that we asked about all types of sexual acts that can have happened, which includes forced intercourse, but also touching or any other sexual acts that she was not happy about or felt uncomfortable about. So it's a big group of sexual acts that are being measured. We found in this survey that 4.4% of all women mentioned that it had happened to them at least in their lifetime. In the report, you will find more details on how it was measured, and in the tables you can find many more details if you download the main report. We see that this figure was increased compared to 2010. We also noticed that for partner violence, women reported more sexual violence in the current survey than in the survey in 2010. And we have the feeling that this more reporting has to do with all the campaigns, the awareness campaigns that happened in the last 10 years to make women aware of types of violence and to make women talk about it more freely. And this is particularly true for sexual violence, because we also know that the Me Too campaign was quite well known in Vietnam when it took place. So we think that some of the increase could be attributed to more openness. The fact that this figure is so much higher than the 1,500 that is reported, it's very similar as for partner violence. We see that most violence that happens in the households or that happens to women is never reported to authorities. So this discrepancy is not surprising. It's because of the nature of the data. So the reported figures are what they are. They are the women that are coming forwards, or they are the parents of children that come and report what's happening to their children. So all of that shows that in a survey you get a different picture than from the official statistics that's based on records, on administrative records. I think it's a very important figure. We also have in the report physical violence against children, which we did not mention here very extensively because there's so much more data in the report. I'm just checking if there is anything to the question, but these are really my comments to the 4.4%. You must realize that this is many different types of sexual abuse that can happen to children. It's definitely a very small portion of this is forced intercourse. It's much more the other types of the touching, molesting of children. And I hope that answers the question. Thank you for this question.
Xin các chuyên gia quốc tế có cái phần trả lời về cái lựa chọn lứa tuổi điều tra.
The question for the age range of the study. Why did you choose the age from 15 to 64 for the survey? Can you answer that question? The selection of the age range. Regarding đây câu hỏi này cũng khá đơn giản thôi. Về lựa chọn lứa tuổi.
In the old studies, we looked at 15 to 49, which was the same age range as in the DHS. And in the DHS, they used 15 to 49 because that's the reproductive health age. And DHS, the Demographic and Health Survey, has a big focus on reproductive health. And the early studies followed the same age range because then they could collect comparable data. But over the years, we start to realize that older women also experience violence, and it's much more important to collect data on violence in the whole life cycle. So by increasing the age range up to 64, we have also data for older women. Increasing it further has some methodological issues because over 64, the portion of the population is so small that you cannot make any statistical conclusions for it. And also there will be more recall problems because we are asking about violence that happened over her whole lifetime. So most studies nowadays look at violence up to age 64, for women up to age 64.
Dạ vâng ạ. Thưa các chuyên gia quốc tế, còn một câu hỏi nữa liên quan.
One more question for you, Henriette. So we have two types, partner and non-partner violence. So under the non-partner violence, why don't you divide or separate into the study in the workplace and in the public spaces? Why don't you divide the non-partner violence into the violence happened in the workplace and the violence happened in the public spaces?
That information is there. It's in the report. I mean, there's so much that we could not present, but we did collect the type of partners, the type of non-partners, so you will find if they are boyfriends or teachers or colleagues at work or other people. We also have follow-up questions on the location where it happened. And we have specific questions even on sexual harassment in the workplace and having to do sexual favors for jobs and school, you know, for your school points. So there are all these questions in the questionnaire. It's just such a limited time that we have to present the data. So I really, if you're interested in all the details, please refer to all the annex tables in the main report. Thank you. I may just add that this is not a specific survey on violence in the workplace, but we have the data. Yeah, just adding.
Dạ vâng, xin cảm ơn chị Henriette và sau đây xin mời chị.
Thank you, Miss Henriette. And now Miss Tú Anh will ask the question related to awareness.
Mất tiếng. Đợi chút, đang điều tra.
Thank you so much for your very interesting question about the conception of a woman with three good things and three standards for women. The programs that are now being supported and promoted by Vietnam Women's Union. And through the sharing in this morning, we see the attitude towards violence, and we see that how this conception impact or the perceptive impact the violence against women. And we know that domestic violence is unacceptable, especially violence caused by the husband to the wife. But we always say one but. In this case or that case, it is acceptable. And in the example you said, for example, if the wife does not fulfill the role in terms of the child care and fulfill other tasks which are considered as very seriously violated of the role, for example, not to follow her mother-in-law's advice or idea, and other issues related to the foreign affairs, the love affairs with others. So in the discussion, the group discussion, normally 70% or 80%, or even in some group discussions, almost 90 to 100% think that for the women that violate the principle in terms of or having love affair are beaten, that is a reasonable cause. I mean, because she is not a good wife, so the husband can beat her. And even if the husband does not beat her, I will do that. So we see that is the perspective. And when we talk about violence against women, we need to talk about these specific values to change the bias against the women and the norms. And when we talk about the divorce, it is also a prejudice we have the perspective stating that women at the age of marriage should get married and stay with the husband, and she's not allowed for divorce. And in the quotation in the cover page of this report, you can see that for one woman, when she can no longer suffer, she got divorced, and she felt like she was free again. And she said that to other women that don't be afraid of the stigma. You can have 2 or 3 husbands. And I think it is about the misconception or misperception against women. And in some cases, even the victims, the female victims of violence, they are proud. They, of course, feel sad about that, but they are afraid of their suffering capability. They still can suffer and be patient to maintain their family, their marriage, and they try to suffer it not for herself, but for her children. Even if she is beaten by the husband, she still prepare the meals for other people in the family, and they are proud of the capability to take care of the financial issue of the family. So I think related to the violence prevention and control, we need to change the perception of women against the violence against women. There is another question to the GSO representative, being participating in both the 2 studies in 2018 and 2019. Can you tell us about the challenges and the advantages of the study in 2019 compared to that in 2018? Madam Nga, can you answer this question? Thank you. I was the one who participated in both the 2 studies in 2010 and 2018. And in 2010 study, it was quite novel to us. We were not sure whether we have selected the right tool set in the world. How is the practice regarding the monitoring of this compared to the poverty monitoring of Vietnam? And it was very lucky because we found the questionnaire of one organization in the world about this, and now this set is recommended by the GSO to all the national GSOs to use to collect the targets or indicators, women-related indicators, to have the comparison. And we can apply the same methodology that is comparative. And in fact, during the study, we see that over 10 years, the awareness of the information disclosure right and the right to answer the interview of women from the elder to the children have been changed. They know about the right to reject. And in 2010, the proportion of people that of the interviewee reject to answer was minor. But in 2018, the number was much higher, and we informed them of that rejection rate. And in the interview, of course, if they join the interview, they will follow it. But in order to assess these people, target interviewee, it was a little bit difficult because they know about the right. And those are the advantages and disadvantages of the study. And for the second study, we have received the consensus. For the first study, when the report was launched, we see that many questions after the workshop, all the telephones of the GSO, of the Director General, and my telephone rang continuously. Many people asked about the study, on site and after the workshop. And similarly to the question of Ms. Luan from UNICEF, I would like to further explain about that. For example, the proportion of of children under 15 children that face the sexual abuse. Ms. Luan already answered that each behavior confirmed to be the case for abuse, and she said 1,000 or maybe less than the number reported here. And she said that maybe millions of women said that before the age of 15 they faced or they was sexually abused. And the figure that you received provided by the administrative agencies, for example, the police agencies or others. In those case, the reported case was very serious. But besides those cases, many people haven't reported or shared the story with anyone, especially the sexual violence caused by the husband or the partner. And 10 years ago, the number was about 50%, and now the number is still the same. 50% of them said that they have never told that story with anyone, and the surveyor was the very first one listened to their story of the violence caused by her husband. And you know that therefore the proportion of the victims of the violence, if you compare it with the total population size, then we see it can be millions. And for the last 12 months, we can see that over the past 12 months, the number of the victims can be like 100,000 or millions of victims. And whether they are ready to come to the counselor or the services. And we can see over the past 12 months how many have been the victims and how many have come to the counselor, and what is the percentage that we can cover, our service can cover.
Thank you, Ms. Sa, for your response. There's one question related to the economic cost of violence, and this question will be sent to NATA, international consultant. Is there any difference in measuring the economic costs of the two studies? And are there any challenges in conducting the study on economic costs of violence in 2019 when we had the qualitative surveys? Ms. Nata, can you answer this question? Vâng. Vâng, xin cảm ơn câu hỏi ạ. Vâng, đây là một câu hỏi rất là quan trọng mà mọi người đã đặt ra.
The economic cost that we found for the 2019 study is very similar to the economic cost that was found for the 2010. Economic cost in 2010 was about 1.78% of GDP, where in the 2019 study it is 1.81% of GDP. I think the most important point to take away is that the cost of violence is very cumulative, it is long-term, and it is hidden. So that the productivity loss tells us how much hidden cost there is to violence, and that as the prevalence of violence changes, slowly there will be a decline in the cost. So that's the first point. The challenges for estimating economic costs is that in a long questionnaire, when you start asking people about all of the different costs that they incurred, there is a fatigue that comes in. So you do find that the responses are much lower. And so that has always makes a underestimate of the true level of cost that women are incurring, that families are incurring, and what the society is incurring.
Vâng ạ, cảm ơn phần chia sẻ của chị Nata. Mặc dù thời gian thì cũng của
Your
hội thảo cũng
response, because of the time constraints, we have had a lot of questions. There are still many to come. The question from our direct participants. So it's in English. Chúng ta cần có kế hoạch gì để thay đổi
behavior which are high risk for violence against women and girls. So có thể tạm dịch ạ, là chúng ta có thể làm gì để có thể thay đổi các hành vi nam tính mà có hại, mà các hành vi nam tính
harmful masculine practices, because it causes high risk of violence against women and girls. So this question won't be answered by Ms. Tú Anh, because CSIP is quite experienced in working with men, in joining hands with women in response to violence. One question for international consultant. We know that recently other countries in the region are conducting the studies on violence against women and using the WHO toolkits. The question is, the other surveys or studies conducted by other countries, are there any similarities with Vietnam? Can we use our data to compare with the regional data and international data? Yeah, so the first question for Ms. Tu Anh, please answer it. Thank you for the question on masculinity, the harmful masculinity. Because the question has mentioned a very significant issue. From our study, we can see that the society seems to put the burden on women for impose the stereotype on women more than men. Women are easy to men and tolerate their harmful habits. So in the future, we may conduct a study on men in Vietnam to see what are the masculine characteristics. Because when we want to change the harmful masculinity, we need to strengthen the good or beneficial masculinities characteristics. So in our program, CSIP is a national partner of UNFPA in the gender-based violence prevention program. In this program, we are having a model working with the urban men to change their harmful masculinity and to promote the useful masculinity. A lot of young dads participated and discussed a lot of issues related to child education and talking to their wives, and they realized that a lot of things they did in the past was wrong. There was some very emotional sharing that men aspire to learn, but no one to teach them about life skills and how to behave as a man. Especially urban men, they do not know how to promote their good masculinity. Currently, we have social media. It may support our activities. So this model used to be very effective with men in rural areas, which was easier because it was easier to gather men in rural areas with the support of community leaders. So when we sat with the men for them to share about their issues, they look from another perspective. Sometimes men had a pressure of being an offender, a perpetrator, while themselves need to change. And who will change them? They were sitting with each other and talk about wife, children. For example, the children when they rode the letters to their fathers, sharing the happy moments of the families when he was a good dad. So these things would change the husbands. And then the children also share what made them proud of their dads. So those activities are very needed to change men. And men should be our partner in this program. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Tu Anh. There's a question for international consultant related to comparing Vietnamese study and other studies in the regions. Have you heard clearly about the questions? Should we retranslate the question to you? The question is that other countries in the region are conducting the studies on women using the WHO toolkits. So are there any differences between the Vietnamese study and other studies conducted by other countries in the regions? And can we use the Vietnamese data to compare with the regional and international data?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, there are quite a few studies being done in the region. I think it's really important. What we spoke already in some of the results where we could say that the rate of violence against women, physical and or sexual violence, is about 30% across the world. That's an average. And Vietnam fits within that average. It's very similar for Vietnam as in other countries. What that figure doesn't show you is the differences that are unique to each country. And something that we spoke about today in Vietnam is that we can see that the rates of physical violence have been going down in younger women, and the rates of sexual violence is being reported at higher rates amongst younger women. So if you want to compare with other countries, you need to look to break it down, say, by age group or by experience over time, and then you can see how it compares. So if we look at the age group in another country, are we seeing the same effect of sexual violence being more spoken about, or is it something that's unique to Vietnam? It's very difficult to say that countries in the same region or next to each other are the same, because it might be that different particular acts of violence are particular to one country, different from another country. And that's why we really encourage you to look at the detail in the report and see what is unique for Vietnam and what messages need to be tailored to the Vietnam public. I think there was another part of this question about how many countries. I might ask Henriette to speak to that, to answer about how many countries have done the survey.
Yeah, there was a question about the comparability, and Kristen answered very perfectly that you can compare rates, but rates hide differences and nuances. But for the Sustainable Development Goals, we compare usually the proportions of women who experienced physical and or sexual violence by a partner in the last 12 months. In our region, we have about 30 countries that have collected data in a comparable way. And when I say our region, I'm talking about the wider Asia and the Pacific region where UNFPA works. And you will find in your report, if you download the report, a picture like this one. I'll show it up, and I think you can see it on the screen. You will, I don't know if you can see this picture on your screen or not. But yes, in this picture, you can see big balls and small balls. And Vietnam is around here, and it is an average size ball. So you have countries where it's physical and or sexual violence is much lower, and you have countries where the proportion of women experiencing physical and or sexual violence is actually about twice as high. So what did the data say? If you only compare the prevalence rate, this aggregate number, that Vietnam is actually somewhere in the middle, and it's comparable to the world average. But you know, this is just a number that we use for global monitoring. But really, to get your deeper understanding, you need to look at the details, just like what Kristen just explained. But you can find these details in the report.
Vâng ạ, xin cảm ơn chị Christine và chị Henrika đã giúp phản hồi lại câu hỏi. Hiện nay thì thời gian.
Now we're running out of time, and we still have questions transferred to us. So the organizers would like to answer online to you later. There are two questions I would like to be response immediately. The first question is on economic costs, whether they are micro or macro. What are they? So my answer is that all the information can be accessed in the detailed report. The economic costs related to healthcare check, and then the lost productivity or the work day, or the repair of the damaged things, you can look at the detailed report. And another question related to the services provided to survivors, for example, reliable addresses or the legal aid center and social work center. So why did women, why the proportion of women seeking for support still very slow, very low? What are the root causes? Yeah, my answer is yes, we found out the root causes for not seeking for help in the qualitative survey we conducted earlier in 2018, and then after that we conduct the qualitative one, and Ms. Tu Anh dig deeper into why the seeking for services was low, and whether our services are really supportive to the survivors. All the information can be found in the detailed report, accessible to you. Now, Ms. Loan will have final words before we close.
Due to the time limitation, and we need to stop and close the Q&A session here. And I would like to thank all the delegates for your great questions to clarify the issues and of interest. And thanks are extended to the international consultants joining us online and giving the answers to all the questions of the delegates. And we would like to thank the 4 representatives of the 4 agencies joining this Q&A session. Before we close the workshop, we would like to give the floor to Madame Naomi Kitahara, UNFPA representative in Vietnam, to have the closing remarks.
In closing, I would like to really thank everybody for being here today, for the launch of this long-awaited survey. We wanted to launch that in February this year, but COVID happened, and we had to see the situation, and it was delayed a little bit. But we really wanted to launch that at this point of time, because the objective is not just to launch the survey data, but the objective is to take action. We do have to stop this social problem of violence against women in Vietnam. We heard that Vietnam might be on average for the region and globally in terms of the magnitude of the prevalence of violence against women, but that does not necessarily mean that we are okay. We are not okay at all. And also, I would like to highlight the part that often people think that violence against women happens because perpetrators drink a lot, or the perpetrators had a problem in office, or too much stress is causing them to act that way. but that is not okay. And the root cause of the problem associated with violence against women is gender inequality. Without addressing equality between women and men, there is no way that we can address the issue of violence against women, because it is not okay at all to hit women, whether it's at home or in the office or in any other places. I just wanted to share one story which I experienced in my previous assignment in Mongolia. We were supporting various protection centers for the violence against women, for the victims of violence. And as I was having a discussion there with one of the social workers, there was big banging at the door. It's not knocking. It was a big bang. And so the victim was running into the center. She was on barefoot. She wasn't wearing really a coat or anything. You can imagine in Mongolia in winter, we are talking about below -30. And so she wasn't wearing really anything. She had 2 boys, 10-year-old and 5 probably. So I cut my mission short. I went back to the office. A few days later, I asked my staff to check on that woman in a center. So the social worker shared me the story that one day she had to just go to buy food or something for children and herself. And social worker and the nurse happened to have opened the door where those 2 boys were there. And the reaction of the eldest boy was immediately to protect the younger boy, 5-year-old boy. So as the nurse opened the door, the bigger son was protecting the small boy, despite the fact that they were in a protection center. They were in the same place. That really shows what was happening at home, what the woman and 2 boys went through at home. That is, we all have children. Most of us have children here. You know that that is not the reaction of children. My boys would be playing the computer game or something, but then immediately to act, to try to protect the younger brother, that's something which we really have to think about. And we do need to think about this issue very hard. And then I wanted to share this story because I don't want the same thing happening in Vietnam. The same thing should not happen in Vietnam. And so I just wanted to conclude this session by sharing with you this story so that we all can work together, not only to support the victims of violence, but to prevent and completely eliminate violence against women in Vietnam. Once again, thank you so much for your participation today, and let us work together and continue to work together. Thank you very much.
Vâng, xin được trân trọng cảm ơn bà Naomi Kitahara. Và thưa quý vị, tới đây thì buổi hội nghị của chúng ta ngày hôm nay cũng xin phép được khép lại. Một lần nữa xin được trân trọng cảm ơn toàn thể quý vị đã dành thời gian tới tham dự chương trình. Và thưa quý vị, sau đây thì ban tổ chức cũng xin được mời quý vị sẽ cùng tham dự một bữa tiệc trưa tại tầng G của khách sạn Melia. Mời quý vị sẽ cùng tham dự. Cảm ơn quý vị rất nhiều.